This meeting to order. Welcome to the summer edition of the State Workforce Innovation Board. My name is Adam Gilbertson and I'm the chair of the board currently, and look forward to a productive day. We have a lot of new faces both on the board and in the crowd today. And I think to start off here, before we move to roll call, we'll have introductions. And Jason, if you would start on your end. Work the way across the board, and then we can do introductions with the audience as well. So thank you, sir.
Sure. Jason Yeager, I serve as the Executive Director of the Industry Association focused on advanced photonics and quantum here in Montana.
Glenn Iverson, CB Shelby.
Sorry, I can't get to one line.
I'm Aaron Callum. I'm with Telco Ministries here in town.
Paul Up with India Resources Group.
David Smith, Executive Director of the Montana Contractors Association.
Jocelyn Anya, Chief Business Officer of SWIB Companies.
Good afternoon, Heather O'Hara, Vice President of the Montana Hospital Association. I'm Casey Buckingham. I'm the Senior Vice President, Chief Human Resource Officer of Benefits Health System.
Good afternoon, I'm Chandler Hermanson with the Department of Public Health and Human Services and the Director of Vocational Rehabilitation.
Morning, everybody. Joe Thiel, I'm a Deputy Commissioner of the Montana University System.
Good afternoon, I'm Clay Christian, Commissioner of Higher Education, Montana University System. Good morning, Brad Hall, President of Black Community College.
Good afternoon, I'm Sarah Schreider, owner of the Sunshine Academy. I'm Ella Owen, Governor's Policy Advisor. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Sarah Swanson. I serve as Commissioner for Montana's Department of Labor and Industry.
Officially Adam Gilbertson, the Senior Vice President for RDO Equipment Company.
Good afternoon, Tammy Higgy. I'm the Executive Director of the State Workforce Innovation Board. Thank you for being here.
Alexander, Project Specialist for the State Workforce Innovation Board.
Deborah Kaiser, Deputy Administrator of Workforce Services Division Outreach. Crystal Armstrong, I'm the Administrator of the Workforce Services Division at the Department of Labor and Industry.
Sarah Weaver, I am the Interim Bureau Chief of the Data and Operations.
Brenda Bassett, I'm the Public Information Officer. Hi, Grace Decker, and I'm the Director of the Montana Advocates for Children. It's a statewide child care policy coalition.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Renee, Performance Manager of Express.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela McLean. I'm the Executive Director of Workforce Innovation and American Indian and Minority and Educational Partnerships.
Amy Watson, I'm the Chief Economist for the Montana Department of Labor and Industry.
Kate Flavin, economist at the Montana Department of Labor and Industry.
Laura Sarkowski, economist at the Department of Labor and Industry.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of 05 Montana.
Alex DuBois, Policy Engagement Director of 05 Montana.
Jason Mitchell, Senior Child Care Business Advisor, 05 Montana.
Cherise Jennings, I'm here on behalf of the Central Montana Child Care Alliance.
And I'm Doug Zander, Pre-Pulse College MSU, Public Constructor.
Perfect. Tammy, if you will call the roll.
I will. Tony Brockman. Casey.
Here.
Here. Commissioner Christian.
Here.
Scott Eisner. Patty
Here, sorry.
Patty Fleming. Adam. Brad Hall. Susie Heidelin.
She will be here at 1.
Chandler Hermanson. Present. Eric Heinbach.
Here.
Paul Hoppa.
Here.
Dwayne Iverson.
Here.
Aaron Callum.
Here.
Josh Montana. Jason Nyfer. Mark Nolan. Heather O'Hare. Here. Matt Olson. Kyla Owen. Here. Clinton Queer. Sarah Schreiner. Here. Harry Seekins Pro. Jason Small.
Here.
David Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Swanson. Here. Joe Teal.
Here.
John Williams. Jim Wanacott.
Here.
And Jason Yeager.
Here.
Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. If we can now ask you to open your information for the last meeting minutes from April. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Paul. A second?
Second.
Are there any comments or discussion on the minutes?
I have a comment.
Yes.
So on page 2 under key clarifications, it says tribal college partnerships and services to underserved populations will continue regardless of wording changes. I think it would respond to the classification or a category change. So that could be changed instead of wording.
I got it.
Okay,
You got it.
we'll make that adjustment. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We will now open to public comment, and we will have a second public comment at the end of the meeting today. Is there any public comment in the room first? Or online? If you could please raise your hand if you would like to make a comment. Okay. Seeing none, we will open that up again at the end of the meeting today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken. Okay.
This is on. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Fantastic.
I'm sharing the screen too.
That's perfect. Okay, so actually I could have set up the same. Thank you for being here for our July State Workforce Innovation Board meeting. A lot of you received several documents before the meeting, and I will have Priscilla go ahead and put in the chat the year one work plan, our mid-year updates. So we are halfway through the year with the 406 Jobs Year One Work Plan, and we have gotten a lot done. I'm excited for this meeting because we're going to actually be highlighting today. We're going to go through 3 different barriers that were part of the 12 priorities for the governor's approved plan. And today you're going to hear about the child care priority. Tomorrow, you're going to hear about the re-entry and disability empowerment. And then, of course, in every meeting, we've been talking about what's happening in the AI space, because that's moving faster than any of us can keep up. But we'll get to cover that tomorrow as well. As far as where we're at mid-year, I'm not going to read the report to you because you guys can look at that, but we have had fantastic movement in many areas. I think I want to first and foremost say thank you to every SWIB board member, to all of our partners, to all of the organizations. We can't do this. There's not one institution, there's not one organization that can do it alone. So thank you for your collaborative spirit and your partnership, because We are moving things along. I think that our greatest movement has been in the apprenticeship space. And for that, I can tell you that progress towards our metrics in that, we've already had over 600 new apprentices in the first half of the year, which is fantastic. Our pre-apprenticeship pathways were developed for 5 of the 6 high priority sectors. And total apprenticeship participation through the first half of the year is 65% higher. Again, you can read the report, but along those same lines, as we continue meeting the metrics and accomplishing things in October, we're going to have to start talking about what is the plan for year 2. What have we accomplished? What are we, because some of these, they're not going to be done. They're not going to be completed in year 1. So please keep that in mind as we talk about, especially as we highlight some of the things that we're going to be talking about at this meeting. And along the apprenticeship line, I'm going to hand it over back to the chair, and he's going to share some information there. Thank you again for being here.
Yeah, Tammy asked me to just share a little bit, as we look at, the focus on sector partnerships in the apprenticeship space and how we work in the building the workforce. We've had an opportunity here in the last couple of months to create a proposal that hopefully in the month of August will be presented to the Department of Labor in the construction industry. And it is kind of modeling after the Advanced Manufacturing Apprenticeship Registered Apprenticeship Program in Arkansas, and then the newly released last month awards in shipbuilding and transportation, the transportation sector. But we're bringing together the Associated Equipment Distributors, which has 6,000 locations across the country, and the Associated General Contractors, which represents about 27,000 construction firms in the United States, to put forth a proposal in the construction industry on registered apprenticeships that will enable any participating company in the United States, it's not Montana only, but across the nation, to enroll and register in a reimbursement program for apprenticeships. And we're expecting that in the next couple of weeks to finalize the draft. Then it will go to the DLL for review, and then come back as an actual RFP. So it'll take a little bit of time, but working through that right now. And I just wanted to publicly thank David Smith and the Montana Contractors Association and Josh Montoya with the Williams Companies as partners in that process. But hopefully it's a model of what can happen as we look in this workforce space with businesses across Montana and across the country in general to drive harder into this registered apprenticeship space. So more to follow on it, but we're pretty close with the final draft, and then we'll present that to the Department of Labor in August. So, and with that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Thanks everyone for being here. One of the items that you'll see in your packet is a memo from the governor's office to begin the interagency meetings for collaboration for workforce initiatives and workforce efforts in the state agencies. And we're really excited. We've had some initial conversations, and there is a need for having this. There is a need for making sure that everyone is using resources efficiently, effectively, and the best that we can to advance our state. So the agenda is in there, and that's just a draft. Any feedback on that would be welcome. Our wonderful chair is unable to attend on the 21st, so we will be altering the dates already. Feel free to give any feedback you might see, any other, anything you'd like to see, that would be great. And if you want to have a conversation about that, I'm later.
We have just a couple of housekeeping announcements before we move on to the child care section.
Thank you, Chair. There are refreshments, beverages out in the hallway, the bathrooms, the men's, you have to take the elevator downstairs, I believe, because of some construction that's going on, or has it been fixed? Ooh, someone is giving me the thumbs up. Woohoo! Okay, thank you very much. I do have some copies of different things, so if anybody would like, just let me know because I have some over here at the table, and thank you again for being here.
We're going to turn this over to Sarah Schreiner and the crew and the commissioner's sponsor.
All right, everybody. Well, I am super excited today because I have been waiting a long, long time for childcare to be one of the top topics that we are discussing. And I recently was told that I have a biased interest in it. I don't know what they're talking about. I think I have a vested interest in this industry. But what I like to tell everyone is the reason behind it is I truly believe that childcare is the golden domino in everything that this board is working on completing and working on implementing, especially when it comes to the workforce. We are essentially the workforce behind the workforce. And so with that being said, when families can't find care and employers can't, then employers can't fill shifts. Employees can't stay fully attached to the labor force, and communities are losing economic momentum. And so by solving the childcare workforce issues and the system issues, that really is going to help us continue to move the 406 Jobs Initiative forward. Tammy, did you want to, there's a note here that says give your info, but you already did that, right? Okay. Okay, do you want to hop down to, okay. All right, so today we are going to hear from a few of our friends at 0 to 5 Montana. They are going to come up and give us some data. And the goal of today's meeting is really to help paint the picture of the child care industry as a whole. And so it is let's see, is Amy Watson here? Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to start with Amy Watson, Chief Economist for the Department of Labor and Industry, and then Caitlin Jensen and her team will be following. Caitlin Jensen is the Executive Director of 0 to 5. Amy's going to walk us through the baseline data. So what does the Montana workforce look like? What are the child care gaps binding it? And what do we know about supply, demand, and the labor force participation? And then following that, Caitlin's going to translate that data into the economic story for a picture of what this means for recruitment, retention, absenteeism, growth, and employer cost, and what levers are going to help us as a state move this metric. This one. Let's just do a PDF. That's a small one. Okay. That sounds good. Good afternoon. It's nice to see you all today. Again, my name's Amy Watson. I'm the Chief Economist here at the Montana Department of Labor and Industry. And I'm excited to be with you all today to talk a little bit about the child care landscape in Montana, its impact on the workforce, and then talk a little bit more about what's going on with the child care workforce, as Sarah mentioned, the workforce behind the workforce. So I wanted to begin today by talking a little bit about childcare availability in the state. And what impact childcare availability or the lack thereof has on both households. And then we have some exciting research in partnership with 0 to 5 Montana on the impact to try to quantify the impact to Montana businesses as well. So every year, the Montana Department of Labor and Industry looks at child care supply and demand. We measure the supply of licensed child care slots at Montana licensed and registered providers in the state. We compare that to the demand for child care, which we measure as the number of children who live in working parent households, meaning either they're a part of a dual parent household where both adults are in the labor force, or a single parent household where that parent is in the labor force.
What we find, the most recent data show that childcare supply meets an estimated 46% of the demand that we estimate. We've seen a little bit of growth in childcare slots over the last year, and a little bit of a decline in the number of children who potentially need care. And so that's been a marginal improvement over the long run, but still seeing pretty consistent shortages across the state. We look at how that varies by county as well. So again, that same metric looking at licensed childcare providers in a county compared to the number of children who might need care. And what we find is a little over half of all of our counties qualify as what we consider a childcare desert, which means that supply meets less than a third of estimated demand. In other words, for every one licensed childcare slot that there is, there's an estimated 3 children who could potentially need care. Some of those most significant shortages, as you may not be too surprised, occur in some of our more rural regions of the state. And then within licensed childcare facilities, we also look at infant capacity, which is capacity specifically designated for children under the age of 18 months and below. And this is a more significantly undersupplied type of childcare in Montana. The entire state as a whole qualifies as a childcare desert. We have only about a third of the estimated supply that we potentially will need to meet all that demand. Some of those, nearly most counties are considered childcare deserts. There's only a few select in the darker blue color that would not necessarily qualify. And so what we wanted to do then is actually, I wanted to highlight a study that was done by the Bipartisan Policy Center that took a national look. They measured childcare supply and demand in nearly the same way that we do at the Department of Labor, but they were able to aggregate this kind of data for the entire nation. And what they found is that we have the 6th largest childcare gap in the nation with data from 2025. You can see some of our, this map shows you how that's relative to other states surrounding us, with Washington, Nevada, Utah also having similar high gaps in assessment. And the neat thing about their methodology in particular was that they used a distance-based approach. So they weren't, typically the way we look at it is by county lines. They did not consider the county lines. It was what is a reasonable driving distance to a nearby facility. And so that captured some of those commuting patterns of a lot of parents. And ultimately what they found is a very similar result to us in terms of the overall gap. And so still very consistent, and then we're able to provide that national perspective as well. Of course, access to and available slots are 2 different things. So a lot of individuals may face barriers with affordability, not just access. And so looking at some of the most recent data, we see that Montana households spend nearly $30,000 for 2 children in licensed childcare providers at a licensed childcare facility in Montana, which translates to roughly 27% of the median household income for that family of 4. The cost of just a full-time daycare for 1 infant or toddler is about $15,000 per year. And that is greater than what you would typically pay for in-state tuition at one of our public colleges, and it's also higher than the average rent that you would pay in the state. So a significant expenditure for many Montana families. And ultimately, what that means is, and why we're talking about this here at the State Workforce Innovation Board, is because that has an impact on our workforce participation, and not just whether or not a parent can engage in the workforce, but to what extent. And so what we find is that there are about 58,000 Montana parents who are considered underutilized, meaning that they're either out of the labor force entirely due to childcare issues and family responsibilities. They may be absent or working part-time instead of full-time because of those responsibilities, or working reduced hours. And so due to, say, their child is homesick from a facility or something like that, or during COVID, we saw this spike because of closures, childcare closures. And there is a little bit of good news here. Over the last year or so, we've seen this number decline some. A lot of that decline is due to an increase in the number of hours that parents are able to work. So it's not necessarily an increase in labor force participation as a whole, but we're seeing a higher prevalence of full-time work among parents. And so that could be driven by a number of factors, but certainly childcare access is a piece of that. On the business side, we're excited to talk a little bit about a survey that we conducted in partnership with 0 to 5 Montana that looked to try and quantify the impact that this shortage is having on Montana businesses. The purpose was to try to create some sort of quantitative measure of the impact from Montana businesses and then what types of solutions are they implementing that would be most beneficial, that they see as having the greatest impact on their workforce, both in terms of recruitment and retention. And so we are in the process of writing up this final report, but we do have all the data prepared at this point. And so kind of getting a sneak peek here as to what some of these survey results look like. And in short, Montana businesses are aware of this issue. About 60% of businesses in the state identify that there is a shortage of childcare in their community. This isn't something that it's on their radar as an issue. About 40% of those businesses report that a lack of childcare is impacting their ability to recruit and retain workers. And about 34% say it's not only impacting their workforce, recruitment and retention, but it's actually impacting their ability to grow and continue to build their business in the way that they would like to. And so that recognition, we can see within Montana businesses. We did this survey just in 2025, and this was a repeat of a survey that we did in 2020. So this chart here shows you how some of those dynamics changed. Our 2020 survey closed in March of 2020, like March 15th. So it is really like right pre-COVID. And we did some statistical tests to see if COVID was impacting our first estimates, and really it wasn't. So this is what you get a picture of, like right before COVID up until right now. And what you can see is that businesses are reporting an increased impact of a lack of childcare on their workforce, both in terms of their ability to recruit and their ability to retain. So then looking at the solutions piece of it, we also wanted to talk a little bit about, or ask businesses a little bit about what types of things they're implementing that they find successful in their businesses. And by far and away, the most common benefit that businesses provide to their employees is flexible work arrangements. We asked about a number of different things just to orient yourself with this table here. The direction, the arrow up, is an increase in the prevalence of that type of benefit provided from 2020 to 2025. So we saw a statistically significant increase in the number of businesses who are providing flexible work arrangements, a increase in the number, as you may suspect, of those who are providing remote or hybrid opportunities, and that does allow for some flexibility for Montana parents. We did also see about a 2% increase in the number of businesses who provide paid parental leave. We specifically asked this leave in addition to vacation and sick leave. It's leave that's paid that's specifically for the birth or adoption of a child. And so that has also been increase in prevalence. And then we did see, again, increased prevalence of dependent care assistance plans. Those are like HSA accounts, but for specifically for dependent care, where you can set aside dollars and the employer can contribute to these funds that parents can use to address childcare affordability. So that's more the affordability piece. Some of those more sort of intensive benefits I would consider, like on-site childcare, are much less common, but businesses did report, more likely to report, that those had the most significant impact. So in terms of the impact, that was the greatest for things like on-site childcare was one that I'm highlighting here, but we also asked about co-ops or reserving spaces at local childcare providers, to help their employees that were specifically for their employees. So businesses not only are recognizing that there is a need, but they are working proactively to try to address this through the benefits that they're providing their workers. So my last little bit, I'll just talk a little bit about what's going on with the childcare workforce using some of the data that we have at the Department of Labor. Of course, as Sarah mentioned, this is a core piece of addressing the childcare shortages throughout the state, is ensuring that there are high quality educators in these childcare facilities that are caring for Montana's children. And as you all are aware, childcare was identified in the governor's and 406 Jobs Initiative as a priority sector. You can see that within the education and childcare sector, we see about 3,400 childcare workers. They make an average wage of nearly $28,000, which is the lowest among all of the educators in the sector. You can see this data shows the entire education and childcare sector. So you can see the public K-12 system as well as our post-secondary system, and then our childcare services, which is this bar here. Employment in childcare has been growing. So the pandemic has brought about significant losses. We saw about an 8% reduction in the total number of childcare workers across the state. And then we saw pretty significant job growth after that. Overall, we've added about 380 jobs, additional childcare workers since 2020, and their employment rate has grown faster than the statewide average over the last 10 years, which we attribute to largely increasing in demand for their services. Wages, as I mentioned earlier, are low for this sector, but they're growing faster than you would expect for the sector average. So in Montana, real wages have grown by about 0.9%. Over the last 5 years, and childcare worker wages have grown by 2.2%. So pretty strong real wage growth over that time period. Again, as the shortage, there's not enough of these workers in order to fill and create more childcare facilities. And so businesses, childcare facilities have to compete for a limited supply of workers, and that puts upward pressure on wages. In our post-secondary report published back in 2022 that we're currently working on updating, we identified childcare workers as an undersupplied occupation. So looking at the post-secondary system and comparing the number of graduates from Montana's post-secondary system to the number of job openings that we project for childcare workers, and in this case, preschool teachers as well, both were identified as undersupplied. In our most recent data, we anticipate about 430 job openings per year for childcare workers alone, and then another 160 for preschool teachers. On average, using the most 24-25 academic year, we see about 100 graduates in early childhood education, and then we're working to increase that pipeline through Montana's registered apprenticeship programs, which I believe you'll get to hear a little bit more about today as well. So with that, I wanted to provide some of our resources. I'll be here this afternoon for questions, but that is all today for you. So thank you, Tammy.
Questions at all for you?
Yeah, I can do questions.
If there's a question.
You have a question?
Yeah, sure.
Do you happen to have this slide available? Just the statistics on that information would be a great conversation with our education office.
That's great. Yeah, we will absolutely make those available.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it is mine, so I'll just eject it.
Okay.
Take it away.
Well, while Jason's getting our PowerPoint slide up and running, I'll just start us out. I'm Caitlin Jensen. I'm the Executive Director of 0 to 5 Montana, and we're so thankful to be here. And thank you, Amy. We really appreciate the partnership with the Department of Labor and Industry and the opportunity to collaborate on data, because we know how critical that is for us helping to tell the story. But we're here today to really help share what childcare looks like in Montana, and also speak to some of the innovative strategies that have been happening, really kind of going back to around that COVID point in time, and to just kind of really help to fully kind of support this picture of what it looks like for employers, for parents, and for the workforce, the childcare workforce. So before we get into that, I just wanted to thank Tammy, to thank Commissioner Swanson, to thank Sarah Schreiner, and all of you for just your attention and your focus on childcare. We're right after this heading over. We have a childcare summit happening over at Fairmont Hot Springs. So if anybody wants to, head over, you're more than welcome. But it was last year at the summit that the governor provided information and was so excited to share the prioritization of childcare within 406 jobs, and really just spoke to his dedication around childcare and wanting to see this investment and this attention on the sector, because it truly is the workforce behind the workforce. So we're going to do a quick introduction. So I always like to just share that I'm also, in addition to my work hat, also another hat is I'm the vice chair of the new Montana Early Childhood Account that was established through House Bill 924. And I am the mom of 3 young children, so I'm very much in the weeds of childcare. I have a 5-year-old who participated in our targeted early literacy last year, but he's in summer care right now, so Leanne's playing Exploration Works in Helena. I have a 2-year-old who's at one of the childcare businesses that we actually helped to get started, and then I have a 7-month-old who we're on wait lists right now still for some childcare in the community. So we're just kind of piecing things together, and but we're very much in it. And then I just like to also just share that you can't really see the picture here, but we've also been invited to go to Washington, D.C. as a family and speak more personally about our experiences around childcare in Montana, and just kind of really reiterate the data that has been shared around the lack of access and what that can do. And I feel very privileged to be in the position that I'm in and be in a leadership role within a small nonprofit, because we get to really work to prioritize how we can support family-friendly efforts within the organization. So several of the initiatives that we'll talk about today, we also implement as an organization. And with that, I'm going to turn over to my fellow co-presenters to introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Jason Nitschke. My title at 0 to 5 Montana is Senior Child Care Business Advisor. Tammy and I have known each other for at least 25 years, in part because she worked with my father, who was an instructor at Great Falls College, MSU, for 37 years. And when he retired, was the most senior faculty in that school's history. CPA by trade, and the son of entrepreneurs. My mother was also an educator. Ironically, I coach business owners, but my background academic background is in journalism, political science, communication. I've been a business owner myself, but while I was at this university, I took a grand total of 0 business classes. I think part of the reason why I put my credentials up here is because most of you who are employers in this room recognize you probably were like me. That was my journey. Most entrepreneurs that I have coached over the years, and I'm going to show some data on this from my work, the vast majority of entrepreneurs nationwide do not have business acumen in their academic background. We do it by learning on the job. Sarah can confirm that in her lived experience as well. We live it through on-the-job training, professional development, so on and so forth. But that's a little bit about been working with entrepreneurs for 12 years. I consider myself an economic developer in this role. And so we'll talk a little bit about where childcare fits. You've heard the terms workforce behind the workforce. I fully believe that. I left a leadership role at a large economic development group to get into the nitty-gritty at the micro implementation level so that I could understand it and so that I could focus on helping all of the other industries have employees. We've seen progress, but there's still plenty of work to do.
Just the right arrow. Right arrow.
Hi, everybody. Alex DuBois, Policy and Engagement Director, 0 to 5 Montana. I am also a mom, as well as my full-time role within the organization. I have 2 kids of my own, and then I have 3 stepkids as well, so we're very busy. I started my career as a childcare provider myself, and I quickly learned that the system wasn't quite working very well, and worked my way up to do advocacy work on behalf of childcare providers and families in our state. I was actually raised in Bonner, Montana, right outside of Missoula here, and now I live in Butte with my husband and my kiddos. I'm just gonna start us off today with a little bit of grounding. If you aren't familiar with our organization, we're an early childhood systems building organization, really focused on increasing access to high quality early care and education, supporting families, and strengthening businesses and communities around the state. We're statewide. We do this work in various different ways. So we offer programs and services, training and technical assistance to childcare providers. We also engage parents, engage communities, and do policy advocacy work. And you'll learn a little bit more about some of the work that we do during our presentation. But we really try to look holistically at the early childhood system to see what kids and families need to really thrive in our state. This is our whole team. We have 15 people. We've grown a lot over the past several years, and we have staff that are all over the state. So we have Great Falls, Choteau, Butte, Missoula, Terry, Montana. So yeah, we have a great team of people that we're representing here today. And yeah, we're all over the state, and we're really dedicated to the work. So as it's been mentioned, childcare is really an economic driver for our state. Employers rely on parents' ability to access childcare to be able to come to work.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Going.
Trying to mute the person. That was my fault. Okay, I won't touch it. Okay.
Is that better?
Sorry.
Can somebody confirm online that you can hear us again?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so understanding what access means for families. Is there a space for my child, and is it for the age of my child? Is it accessible? Does the location, the hours meet my needs? Transportation, can I get there? Affordability, can I afford the care that is available for me? And then that last piece, is the care high quality? Are their children safe, supported? Are they learning? And is the professionals caring for my kids and giving them what they need? Quality is a big component of childcare. The early years are such a critical time. So 90% of a child's brain is developed by the age of 5, and high quality care can be really beneficial for children. It can really help set them up for success. James Heckman, an economist, has been doing research around high quality early care and education experiences with children, and he's found that every $1 invested in those experiences can have a return on investment to up to $16. So really investing in those early experiences is a smart economic investment for our state's children and future. And as we've kind of alluded to, childcare is really important for employers too. Not only do they need childcare for the employees that are working in their working with them, but also we're finding that employees are looking for employers that offer family-friendly business practices. So there's some data on the sheet, but yeah, employees are really looking for that because it's really stressful when you are raising young children and you're working and you have childcare challenges that are impacting your work, and having an employer that has family-friendly policies and practices can really make the difference. And then, I'm gonna pass it over to Jason here in a minute, but we always like to talk a little bit about the funding of childcare because it's really complex. So at the end of the day, childcare businesses are private businesses, but there is some funding that goes into the system to support it. So the Childcare and Development Block Grant is at the federal level. It comes into our state to DPHHS, which is a CCDF administrator. And they use that funding for a couple different things. The biggest chunk of money goes to supporting families through the Best Beginnings Childcare Scholarship, or the Childcare Subsidy Program is what it's called. And that supports families in paying for childcare. They also support childcare licensing and then childcare provider support. So training, technical assistance, other supports for those childcare workers and businesses. At the end of the day, the biggest revenue source that childcare providers are getting is coming from the consumers, so from the families through private pay tuition, and or if that family is getting childcare subsidy, that's getting paid to the businesses as well. And then I did just want to note, there's also some other systems that are supporting childcare, including the federal 45F program. So that's for employers, they can get a tax credit for supporting childcare and other benefits for their employees. And then there's also the CDCTC, which is for families to support costs for childcare. Jason, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, your turn.
So they looped me into this presentation on Friday afternoon, so I didn't create all of these slides. So you'll have to just go with me on this. I'm glad that there's at least one chuckle on this. So I'd like to just lay out, or they would like me to lay out, I'm kidding. Just lay out some of the business models so that you guys can, I mean, there are business people in here who can generally understand revenue structure, cost structure, and so on. I'll lay some of that out for you. But before I do that, just some context on my background. In the last 12 years, I've helped to coach, counsel, advise, and train somewhere in the range of 4,600 entrepreneurs and business professionals, private sector, obviously, but for-profit and nonprofit alike. I'm reaching that 10,000, that magic 10,000 hour number, which might mean something depending on what books you read. I've worked across, that was supposed to be a joke, you gotta laugh. When I point at you, you're my laugher. In my 12-year career, I've worked with somewhere in the range of 20 or more in different types of primary industry sectors. And since I've come over to 0 to 5 over the last 4 years, I've worked with about 250 childcare programs. For perspective, there are at any given time between 800 and 900 licensed childcare providers in the state of Montana, again, at any given time. So that's what do your math on that. Amy, you can do the math. What is that, 30%? Call it 30%, cool. But the common thread, again, what I mentioned earlier, the common thread that I see across all industry sectors, private business owners, and nonprofit operators is that they are passionate about the thing that they do, but do not have academic credentialing, backgrounds, degrees in how to own or operate a business. So we're good at the thing, but we don't know how to do it well. And if you're in business to do a thing, you have to be in business first. And what we've seen in this industry is that there aren't enough people who are in the business, doing business well, running businesses well, so that they can be in the industry long term. So I was asked to provide some kind of insights, and so I just kind of pulled out some things that are pretty common that I see at the implementation level, working at the volume that I do with private sector childcare owners and operators starting, growing, expanding, stabilizing, and exiting the industry. The very first one is workforce availability. You guys are the State Workforce Innovation Board. So what I try to do in implementation meetings and coaching sessions is to say to people, what are innovative solutions at your implementation level? and I'm talking specifically about childcare providers, but you can extrapolate this to your industry. If we don't understand the actual root cause of real problems at the implementation level, at the unit level, at the business level, you can't create innovative, creative solutions to those problems, which is why I'm excited I get to talk to you guys today. The innovation equation is problem plus solution equals opportunity. And so I'm going to throw some things at you guys, and hopefully the board, through Sarah, can take some of those things and play the what about game and do something about it. So with the labor force participation rate currently in Montana, according to the Federal Reserve website that I check monthly, 65.1% is our current LFPR. Is that right?
Yeah.
About that, well, that's what it says. The Federal Reserve, I'm going to believe them. That is at a 50-year low in Montana. 50-year low. It's lower than where we were post-COVID. It's lower than where we were 2008, 2009 financial crisis. It's as low as it's been since I was 11 months old in 1976. So when the labor force participation rates are that low, and Amy's presentation showed this, who are the industries, what are the industries that are most negatively affected? Low wage, on the workforce availability component, correct? Low wage people are going to go where they can make more money because they just have the competitive power to be able to do so. So labor force participation rate is driving a workforce availability problem because people work, number one, for compensation, number two, for benefits, number three, to deliver impact and participate in culture. And then the hidden fourth one is to get away from their families. Thank you. All right, good. The other thing that I see quite frequently is that there is a skill and a time-based gap between getting early childhood educators into the classroom alone and in charge of children. And Sarah can articulate this in more specific detail. But when there is a time delay between, I want to hire you, here's your job offer at $14 an hour or $12 an hour, or what the current U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics data is for preschool teachers, $17.57 median statewide for preschool teachers. When there is an 8-week gap between here's your job offer and here you're alone with children, we have to remember as entrepreneurs running businesses, we invest in people to do what? Generate revenue. We invest in assets to do what? We generate revenue with those things. And if I can't hire you and put you into a revenue generating position for 8 weeks, that's a real problem. So the other thing that we see are retention challenges. If I can go to a marijuana facility or to a fast food facility or to work at Target or Walmart for a 35% pay increase or a double pay increase, I'm going to probably do that because I might also be able to get benefits. I have small group coaching cohorts that this is the #1 problem. Even if I can pay as an early childhood education business a meaningfully living wage, let's call it $17 an hour. I don't know about you all, but that's not a living wage to me. But you can't get health insurance, retirement benefits, or even paid professional development, let alone paid time off. I'm going to go work at a marijuana business, which we see that with some regularity. Awareness of workforce resources is one, and I'll throw in the 45F employer-sponsored tax credit into this. The vast majority of accountants that I know, and again, I mentioned my father is one, my sister is one, I know a bunch of them, don't even know about the 45F. Don't even know about it. So if the accountants don't know about it, how are the business owners? And then what do you use that for? To support your employees as a benefit by helping them offset the cost of tuition. One of the things that I hear most frequently, can't do that. Can't do this, can't do that. Unfortunately, we're not in a position in the workforce, in the labor force participation rate environment. We can't accept, can't do that answers anymore. Can't. So I would love to see a real push on increasing the utilization rate on the 45F at the federal level. There's also administrative burdens. I don't have time to be able to do the paperwork that I need to be able to do to participate in the Best Beginnings scholarship subsidy or the Child and Adult Care Food Program or fill out other programs that potentially could be participated in. One of the things that I really work with folks on is that government works at the pace of government, private sector works at the pace of private sector. Private sector has to be a solution to their own problems. They have to get creative. I push a lot of self-determination. Solutions are within you. So we're not simply suggesting when we work with our clients, again, early childhood education, business owners and operators, we're not suggesting that the solution's out there somewhere. You're a part of the solution too. Not enough of that happening at the implementation level. The last thing I'll say is the commoditization of the industry. When there's a commoditization of any industry or any product, it's a race to the lowest price. Yes? Is that a fair assumption? Childcare, as Alex mentioned, really is critically important with regards to its quality. I pulled my daughter, I'm a single parent, pulled my daughter out of her early care environment, put her into a 30% more expensive environment. And then when she got into kindergarten, the teacher said, "Your daughter went to Plain Learn Academy in Great Falls, didn't she?" I was like, "Yeah, how would you know that?" She goes, "She's the best student in my class." Her third grade teacher said the exact same thing to me. My daughter just finished elementary school. She was the only girl in her entire class, her entire school, only girl, to be able to receive the Presidential Academic Excellence Award. High quality early care and education services matter for the children, but it also matters for you all as employers 18 years down the line. So we don't want to see the race to the bottom. So the concept of affordability, it's a real issue. Employers have a place in this. We're not going to have workers if we don't pay living wages. $17.57 an hour is not a living wage. If you don't believe me, go to the MIT living wage calculator and they will tell you. So there's a couple of other slides here. This is kind of revenue and cost structure analysis here, what this industry looks like. The operating expenses in an early childhood business, somewhere between 65 and 85% will be labor expenses. 25% somewhere are your fixed operating expenses. Biggest component of that obviously is that we have ratio requirements, and we are not and will never suggest that we need to change ratios. Safety of children should come first, and if we were to put, I don't know, can you imagine 10 infants to one teacher? This is just not a good idea. I think I'm running a little bit long on time, so we're going to move past this. So I wanted to make my point. Some of the data here, this 32.
We're not in any rush. We were ahead on the schedule, so
Okay.
don't feel rushed.
Well, maybe 10 of you ever heard my father say this. My dad always says, "Jason, be careful of pontificating on your own verbosity." He was an accountant, and yet he had this wordsmithing interesting thing that was going on. But 32A is we can take that and leave that data point. For preschool teachers, we're looking at about 35 grand. And the 406 jobs report for this sector, I believe K-12 teachers are 42-ish, right? So, something like that. Is that right? I forget. It's been about 6 weeks since I read that report. You've seen this slide already, so I'm going to skip past it. Where are we next? You?
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah. Now we'll try to go. Sorry, I'm getting so excited about this one. All right, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time now that Jason shared his real life experience. And Jason was out on a road trip, so I couldn't really have an opportunity to talk to him about this until Friday. But we're very excited that we could be here. But we just wanted to give a quick little highlight. I'll kind of zoom through these, but just wanted to share a little bit about what's led us to being not only in a position to being able to be so on the ground and helping childcare providers and those who want to start a business, but also just talk about what else is at play right now within our childcare landscape in the state. And I'm sure I'm not going to hit on everything, but just wanted to kind of give you a bird's eye view of what's going on. So, thinking back to COVID, I'll just kind of start there. Even at that point and just prior to, we knew that childcare was a challenge. I think there was a lot more attention to it. People, and especially employers, are starting to pay more and more attention to the workforce recruitment and retention issues. And it was at that time that Amy and I were actually on a statewide project together, and to kind of do some of that initial analysis and recognize what was happening. And we pulled together employers to talk about an innovation summit. And I would just say that since then, we just have seen such a huge surge of support and engagement from the business and economic development sectors in this state. It's really been powerful in being able to help identify and name and get the support and the political will that's needed to help advance these issues. It's also why we're here having this conversation. But I just wanted to mention that it was really during, around COVID, and then with the influx of ARPA funding around 2021, that we saw more funding coming into our state, not only for that immediate relief for childcare businesses to keep their operations going, but we also saw some additional funding come to the state. It came to all the states, but it came to Montana for more flexible funding to support infrastructure and community innovation. And so we had an opportunity at that point. I was on a group also with Amy and several others, state agencies, business leaders, childcare business owners, to really look at what were some opportunities. And so it was really at that time that there was also a red tape reduction initiative set forward by the governor's office to look at childcare licensing reform. And then more recently, we have an updated statewide early childhood strategic plan, a needs assessment, and a comprehensive fiscal analysis. I'm going to get into those here in a moment. But also just wanted to, talk about how there's just been this a higher surge of interest and recognition of the importance of this field and the professionalism of the field. Just give me like 5 more. Okay. Okay. So I'll just kind of highlight this, and we'll be sure to share all the slides as well. But just wanted, as you guys are looking at recommendations and thinking about things in the future, just want to name that our state has gone through a pretty intensive process over the past couple of years, spearheaded through a grant that came down through the preschool development grant. It came to the Department of Public Health and Human Services, and they pulled together a lot of partners to identify what are some different recommendations that could go forward into the early childhood system. And they specifically named some areas around workforce and around childcare. And so we wanted to just put these up here because I think it's pretty clear that there are some opportunities that are ripe for the taking, and that can really use some additional focus and potentially investment or just awareness around what they are, so that you can really understand how you might be able to support. I think, one thing that comes to mind, there's a couple ready now recommendations, but just helping to build that partnership between public schools and early care and education providers at the local level to really help to support early learning opportunities, as well as opportunities for us to look at the childcare workforce within our planning efforts across the state. And then there are also some emerging recommendations that came out of the reports as well, just around how we can support infrastructure funding, around licensing capacity, how we can work to grow that, and then streamlining the dual enrollment for best beginnings in the child and adult food program. That's something that comes up continuously about areas that we can support. Another study that was recently completed at the end of this last December was the comprehensive fiscal analysis. And that was an opportunity for Montana to engage in a study. There was a national group called P5 Fiscal Strategies, and we partnered with them as well as with many state agencies. And I think there were over 250 stakeholders that were engaged throughout this process within large constituent groups, and then smaller ad hocs and an advisory for an 18-month study process to essentially break down what is the current funding that goes into our early childhood system. And that was defined through childcare, home visiting, early intervention, and our publicly funded preschool programs. And so just specifically looking at the childcare piece of it, what this was really aiming to do was help us to quantify if we were going to, get affordability down to that 7% marker that we identify federally as being affordable for childcare for families, what would that take? And also taking into consideration a livable wage for the childcare workforce industry. And I didn't put the number up here, but it's like $800 billion. Like, it's a lot of money that it would take for our state to invest in getting childcare to that affordability marker for families. But there are a lot of incremental changes that can happen along the way. And so if at a future time you want like more of a deep dive into the CFA, we can definitely provide that. But that also is a helpful tool for us to look at. And it's something that many other states across the nation have been doing to really help kind of make those incremental marker changes on how we can make those investments. And many also start with establishing an early childhood trust, which Montana passed last legislative session through the Growth and Opportunity Fund, the GO Trust, and early childhood childcare is a part of that as well. And so that gives kind of a nice framework or an opening into how continued investments can be made within this sector. So just to kind of give a little bit of framing. So this goes back to kind of looking at the big picture at the childcare system. So again, this is a complex, system that we're looking at. And we worked at the national level with a group called First Children's Finance, and they really identify like what is the ecosystem that's going to help support childcare, and it takes a lot of different things. And we, as an organization, just kind of focus on a couple of these areas, but we know that all these areas have to be kind of working together for there to be support and funding into childcare, and it has to happen at multiple levels. It has to happen at the individual childcare business level. There needs to be supports, and then there needs to be the buy-in from the systems level, both the community and the state and federal governments. And I'll just mention too, because this is also where a lot of the support and work came out of the apprenticeship program, but we were part of this Montana team for this is called the Montana Early Care and Education Business Collaboratory, which is a made-up word, but it's like collaboration and a laboratory. Anyhow, but it was through that effort in 2020 that we did a full scan of all the funding that goes into childcare and where there are missing gaps within these grid areas and where can we start to put some emphasis. And so it was through that effort that we identified that there was a lack of childcare business support. There really wasn't any technical assistance or consultation specific to childcare businesses. And so that was really where the impetus for that buy-in came from. We also recognized that there needed to be more supports for cost efficiencies within the childcare system. So there were recommendations and then funding that was put forward through ARPA to put together shared services and substitute services. And also recognizing that there needed to be more community level support because, and we still do this as an organization, but there's employers or community partners that are like, how do we kind of do this? And we really kind of work behind the scenes to help set goals and objectives moving forward. And then we knew that within the childcare workforce, there was a huge opportunity for the pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship program and how that could be reformed. And we're just so thrilled by how far everything has come and gone and will continue to grow. I'm just going to spin through these really quickly, unless you really want to get back up here, Jason, but I think we're good. Okay, so just really quickly, just so you know a little bit more about what we do as an organization, we do support the Montana Childcare Business Connect work. That's the work that Jason really guides his business advising through, but it's a hub for childcare business support. We have resources, we provide interactive workshops, we provide resource and referrals, or not resource and referrals, sorry, shared services, substitute support and services, and we also provide community level capacity building. We also provide several trainings and in the summit that we're hosting this week. And then just part of this work that we do through Business Connect too is that we're a partner with state agencies. We worked with DPHHS through the PDG V5 grant, a federal grant, preschool development grant, and spearheaded a childcare workforce and recruitment cohort that we supported 2 of these cohorts and really offered in-depth, personalized technical assistance with childcare businesses all across the state. And what we learned from that was that I'll skip ahead, was that there was a lot of need around just employee engagement and recognition, work culture, environments, professional development, onboarding, employer branding, outreach, really these kind of fundamental supports that were needed. And it just took putting together this cohort to be able to identify what those needs were and have someone behind the scenes who could really work with folks who were in leadership positions in childcare businesses to implement new practices to help support that recruitment and retention. And from that, we saw a pretty good influx of retention. And so within cohort 1, we saw 68%. And then with cohort 2, 85% of being able to keep their retention of their staff, which was higher than the average of staff turnover. And then this is just a map to show where we provide our business and community partnerships. We have several different cohorts that we run, and then we also work across our tribal communities. And then Family Forward Montana, do you want me to run through this? Okay, is our initiative that supports employers in their family-friendly practices. It's basically a resource hub. And then we also are part of the Best Place for Working Parents network. And so employers can actually get like a little badge of recognition for going through a quick survey process and showing that they're Best Place for Working Parent. And like Alex said, that we're hearing from parents that they're starting to really look at what their employers are offering in terms of these childcare benefits. So you can scan and look at it a little bit more. And then we also provided, just as another kind of idea or strategy, but we ran 2 cohorts of employer-sponsored childcare grants. This was through partnership with DKHHS, but and through that same funding stream, which is now over, but so we're just kind of finishing out the second cohort. But we worked with employers all across the state, 26 employers from a variety of different industries and sizes, to support them on what they kind of had a menu of option of different childcare supports, including on-site, near-site childcare. They could put in place a dependent care assistance program. They could institute a variety of different kind of services and supports. And we have seen that be able to provide support for childcare to 250 employees. And I think it was just really important to be able to do this pilot because it gives us information for us to think about moving forward as something that might be an opportunity to sustain. We also know that because those employers are contributing to the childcare support for their employees, that is having a direct benefit on the childcare businesses themselves. And we hear about this feedback loop through each of these experiences of the cohort members. And I also just want to point out too that sometimes we hear like the 45F or these other benefits like, oh, those are only for, big industry, larger businesses. And most of the businesses, well, pretty much all the businesses we worked with were smaller businesses, small, medium, large. But it was also just really inspiring to see, as an example, several public schools in our more rural parts of our state put in place on-site childcare, and that could help to meet the needs of their the teachers within the school district and the community. So these are just a couple examples. I'm just going to kind of wrap it up because I know we're way over time. But we have been traveling around the state. We do a community roadshow ahead of every legislative session. And these themes are just pretty on track with what we continue to hear from employers and from parents and childcare providers. Just that recognizing that affordability for families continues to be a huge challenge in our state. Families are struggling to find and navigate resources. And of course, workforce challenges for childcare businesses, just always raised to the top. We've been to how many communities? 10 communities over the past few months, and just continue to hear these themes around recruitment, retention of workers, low wages despite high expectations, provider burnout, the lack of substitutes, and then staffing shortages. Also knowing that we hear this from parents and experience this personally too, but just around infant toddler care, it's just really hard to find. And it's just a hard workforce to be in. And so when well, this just shows there's a lot of support. So as we look at some ideas for future consideration, just recognizing that there's no silver bullet to anything that we push forward within childcare. As I mentioned before with that big study, I mean, it's a big dollar amount if we're going to like fully fund childcare, make it accessible and affordable to everyone. And that takes years, but it does take a plan. And we really appreciate now that we have, you know, a number and some strategies that can go into that. But we also recognize that foundational to us getting anywhere is also having that foundational support. And so I'm just speaking from our perspective, even within business advising, those who have received business advising, it's voluntary, have done really well. And we just see that as such a promising practice. But we know that if there were opportunities to kind of encourage more to do that, that would make a huge impact. That gap support, so just like that kind of more minimal amount of funding that can help programs between when they're licensed and bringing on new hiring of staff. And that background check process is another area of efficiency that could really be explored and supported. Liability insurance continues to come up with, well, all the time. For many years, we've been trying to figure out what is that policy lever to really help support it, and have talked within the Economic Development Interim Committee, but it's still a challenge, and so we're working on that, but just wanted to name it in this group as well, because it's something that can definitely be cost prohibitive to childcare businesses. And then just that, yeah.
Just for perspective, can I add,
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I turn this mic on, just to add a data point? Just to add a data point to that insurance number. I track this kind of anecdotally, and the National Association for the Education of Young Children also tracks insurance year over year, general liability year over year premium increases. And my data tracking, just to me, and the NACI, the National Association, their data tracking in the insurance in the early care and education industry, annual premium increases are anywhere from 30% annually to 300% annually. Can you imagine in your industries if those numbers tripled for you? What would you do?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And please feel, I'm like trying to go through, so I'm like not being great, but it's so important. I think like as we hear childcare businesses talking about how they want to raise wages, they want to keep their doors open, something like this comes along and it makes it really, really hard. And it's just something that's happening all across the nation that we're in good touch with a lot of other states, but it's something that we just need to make sure that we're naming. And then this is also another area that Jason brings up, but a lot of, you know, the federal funds that come down, you can't use it for new builds, but that's also something that's very cost prohibitive to new childcare businesses, and just kind of keeping standards up with licensing. And so if there's opportunities for low interest revolving loan funds, this is something that New Mexico is one of those states that now offers, you know, childcare access to a lot of families. They also have a low interest revolving loan fund because they recognize that you have to have supply in order to meet the demand. So, so that's another strategy. The employer-sponsored childcare program, like I mentioned, it's sunsetting because of the federal funding, but that's another opportunity just to keep employers engaged and kind of give that a little bit of funding on the front end to help with sustainable strategies moving forward. And then we also see some great opportunities around career and technical ed within early childhood development classrooms. More and more are starting to pop up around the state, which is great. And several are partnering for the pre-apprenticeship, as well as with schools that are offering that on-site childcare, not only for their employees, but for the community. And so students can really get that hands-on experience working with kids through the guidance of educators and professionals, which is a really great opportunity for us to look at a pipeline for the early care and education workforce. And like Jason mentioned, just broader awareness around what employer benefits may be available through the 45 tax credit. And of course, the workforce. We just know that there needs to be more support. We need to look at more opportunities to expand the apprenticeship, the pre-apprenticeship for high school students, and funding for professional development in general. So with that, sorry we went way over, but really appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, let us know. And there's our contact information.
And maybe take questions. questions if anyone has questions.
Yeah.
Anybody have questions? Oh,
Oh,
there's you.
yeah, we have some questions.
I'll run the
Yes,
mic
go ahead.
to you.
So what's the secret sauce for a successful center?
Oh,
I
Jason.
worked at the YMCA and in 2 years, we lost $40,000 worth of daycare child. The Best Beginnings program sounds great, but it's not. Because it's, if the parent doesn't bring their kid, you don't get paid for that day. You still got the teacher in there. I don't know, it's 10 years ago, but
Yeah.
what's the secret sauce? What's the secret sauce that the successful centers are doing?
Excellent question, David. Thank you for asking. I'm assuming you want me to try this one.
Yeah, go for it. You're the expert.
I think the secret sauce is, first of all, starting with the acknowledgement that the childcare business is a business first. And to be able to be a business, if we assume that the only way we generate revenue is through one source, that's a high-risk industry. And it's a high-risk business. Every business I've ever worked with that has gone through bankruptcy and catastrophic failure has had one type of customer, one type of product or service, one. And when that one goes away, so too does the entirety of the business. Also, aside, like adjacent to that, is when we are a one source of income business and we need to be competitive to attract people, compensation, benefits, culture, to be able to stay on pace with other industries to compete for talent. And the only way we generate revenue is through tuition. Then we increase the affordability issue. So the secret sauce to me is number one, revenue diversification, increasing business acumen. Can you manage a business as the operator of that business, the administrator of that business? Do you know what levers to play with? If I need to increase cash flow, do you know as the entrepreneur that I can adjust prices, I can adjust volume, and I can play with my fixed and variable costs? Do you even know that stuff? And the programs that I have worked with for extended periods of time have learned the fundamentals of business. They start to learn some of the basic levers, things that I can play with, and then they start to say, how else? How else can I generate revenue? How else can I figure out how to pay and be competitive in the labor market? I'm not sure, David, if I'm answering your question, but that's the starting point. We've got to get more folks to understand business, the basics of it.
I think a lot of it depends on the facility and the layout of the facility because of the different age groups that you have. And we tried to do it in a facility that just wasn't real conducive for numbers. It wasn't just about volume.
Yes, you're right. And there is an economy of scale that happens. And Sarah is an excellent example of an organization. She's got multiple locations. She's operating at scale. But if you're a home-based program with 8 children, that's not an economy of scale. You don't have purchasing power. You're operating out of the house. In my experience, scale starts to happen at about 60 kids. 60 kids paid every day. Full-time equivalent slots every single day. And yet in our state, the vast majority of the 800 to 900 providers are in the 25 to 40 range. That's why that revenue diversification component and the payer diversification component. I mean, we're at the University of Montana. If you think that the only way the University of Montana generates revenue is through the sale of tuition, you're wrong. I drove past the football stadium to get here today. I had somebody, an MBA student at Stanford University, interview me last summer, and she told me that in the MBA program at Stanford University, we're talking about Stanford, California, right? Not Stanford up by Great Falls. That 60% of the revenue for Stanford's MBA program was through consultation in Silicon Valley, not through tuition. So that's a really important thing that most businesses need to figure out. And what MIT teaches through their Sloan School of Management is get off the beach, sell more than one thing.
Your last slide made me think of this. You were talking about other ideas, mentioned some other states, and I go back to slide 80 had the national map on Google My Memories. So Montana's like 46% of supply of instructors to demand. But if I look at two adjacent states, there's North Dakota and Wyoming on that map.
Yeah.
They're really, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at where one was. Those two states are really good proxies, right? Good demographic proxies, similar industries, similar population densities. They were anywhere from 25 to 50% of that gap less than Montana. Are they doing something fundamentally different than Whitman?
I mean, what I know from at least North Dakota, I know that they've passed legislation, like they put more funding into public preschool, they put funding into their early childhood system. So, so I know that, and I don't know as much about South Dakota. I know that they're, well, I'll just say that they have some more lax licensing regulations.
Sorry, Wyoming, North Dakota, that's what's up.
Oh, yeah, and Wyoming too. So they have much more lax licensing regulations, and that's something that we've really, you know, as I mentioned before, we've had licensing reform to really make sure prioritization of the health and safety of kids is there, but there are some states that have really pulled back on that. Yes, it may create more revenue because you can serve more kids, but is that the right thing to do? So there is that consideration, but I'd say between that and then also just more public will and more public dollars going into the system, whether that's through like a child care subsidy enhancement or through some of those fundamental supports around like low interest loan programs, facility enhancements so that you can kind of right size your facility and you're not dumping, you know, all your money into those pieces of the business. So so those are a couple things. Yeah.
All right, we have time for one more question. Oh, there was an online question, then I'll grab it.
Hold on. We'll take public comments in the public comment section. This is a board meeting, so the questions for the board, but we certainly encourage them during the public comment section.
Okay, not a board member, we'll get to that question.
We will come back to it in the public comment.
Mine's a brief follow-up. Can you dive into more of what revenue diversification looks like for successful centers in this industry?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that the vast majority of programs that I have interacted with over the last 12 years have tuition as a percentage of gross revenue somewhere in the range of 95%. Okay, so we also have program participation and fees are the two other types of primary revenue sources. So fees, think about transportation fees, food and you know, wipes, that kind of stuff. Program participation, we're talking about.
Yeah. But then, you know, there's sometimes your perspective change.
Got it. I'm a squirrel brain, so I can't think while other people are talking. So those are the current three primary types that get us to 100% operating revenue. But I mentioned before in my comments, my initial comments, two of the real important business ratios that I try to teach, and then we kind of develop off, to answer your question off of that, two fundamental business ratios. What do we invest in assets to do? Generate revenue. What do we invest in people to do? Generate revenue. And that applies to every industry sector. And if we understand those two fundamental ratios, we can simply ask the question, how else? How else can I use my assets? So to answer your question, if your facility would allow, you pay your mortgage and your property taxes and your insurance 24/7 now, right? How else can I use my assets in the 12 to 14 hours a day and the additional days during the weekend that I'm not utilizing it? We can ask the question, how else? And if we are in an education industry, I mean, we're at the University of Montana, K-12 programs, public and private, are the early ed is the early ed component of that industry. So if we are educators, how else can we educate? Who else can we educate? And Sarah could speak more specifically to how she does that, because I know Parenting education is certainly one of those things. And I've actually recently helped a program in my neck of the woods. They've gone from 90% tuition derived to 50% tuition derived, and the other 50% is adult education, parenting education. But community events, certainly one of those things. Community outreach and engagements, community collaborations and partnerships. I have a whole spreadsheet on our website on this.
Jason, I think just one other thing that Jason mentioned this too, but I think one thing we've heard, and through the Elegant Employer Sponsored Grant Program and working at the community level too, but the facilities that are on site, like within a school district or within a healthcare facility or within, somewhere else where they're helping to take costs of some of those overhead costs for just your rent and upkeep, that can then have a direct reduction on what you're needing to charge families. So that's something like within the school districts, we've heard that they're actually able to significantly subsidize or reduce the costs for parents because they're not having to also pay for the overhead. And so that's something to also just be aware of.
I would just add, again, the 4 levers to increase cash flow in a business: increase price, increase volume, decrease variable and fixed costs. That's what she just described. But volume is a really interesting discussion that I would argue is a diversification component. There are so many things we can do on volume that are, if we understand how we generate income in a business, we sell products and we sell services. Right? So how else can we generate revenue that is not tuition derived solely?
And unfortunately, it's frowned upon to have preschool football teams and stadiums. We haven't quite up to where we can have our fans and our own swag yet. So thank you so much, Certified. We really appreciate you guys and the information that you do. Thank you. All right, so moving forward, we are going to invite Rhiannon Shook to share a brief overview of the workforce pipeline that is already in motion, the Child Care Apprenticeship Program. The purpose of this isn't to solve everything through apprenticeship, but to understand how this pathway can help with recruitment, retention, and career development in the child care sector.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm, like Sarah mentioned, I'm going to provide a very high-level overview of our current apprenticeship program opportunities. I don't know why the slide did that, but we're just going to move along. So apprenticeship isn't anything new necessarily for Montana. A program was developed in 2004, and we call it MCAP. It's Montana Early Childhood Apprenticeship Program. And that program was developed in collaboration with Department of Health and Human Services. And the program over the years, since 2004, has had over 400 participants and does support the pathway to earn an associate's degree. That program has had funding to support the apprentices to help cover the cost of tuition, which has waxed and waned over the years. Currently, there is no direct funding supporting the cost of tuition. And as you've all heard from 0 to 5 and some of the past presenters, that our workforce is being paid very low wages, and for us to hope that they can pay for college tuition is a big ask. So it is something that I'm hoping that we'll continue to figure out how we support individuals to earn their degrees at a no to low cost model. When I was hired in 2023, I was able to take a look at where we might have had some gaps in supporting professional development and some opportunities to use apprenticeship as a way to help get early care and education individuals educated. And we identified that supporting a CDA certificate would be a really great opportunity. So in 2023, we started out with a pre-apprenticeship program that is now a full apprenticeship program to really pilot this program that we developed from scratch. And we did that in partnership with Early Childhood Services Bureau at Department of Health and Human Services, some support from 0 to 5, OPI, many partners, lots of conversations to really try to figure out how to develop a program that would successfully help individuals to earn certification, specifically the Child Care Development Associate Certificate. I'm kind of recovering from a cold, and my heart's racing, so, and I was told to be quick, so I'm trying to talk super fast. Also, we, with the collaboration with OPI, we've looked at ways to support high school students. And so we now do have a pre-apprenticeship program that we are ready to start enrolling high school students in, and we have all the technical assistance and support to help successfully support that student to earn their CDA certificate. Just a quick little overview of our CDA apprenticeship program. It is a one-year program. It falls under the minimum requirements of 144 hours of training. That training is done online, so anybody that has access to a computer and internet can participate in the program. We have 2 courses that are very much like a college course. This is an advanced training, and we have matched it to meet the requirements of that CDA certificate. And through our partnership with UM Western, the student can earn up to 8 college credits. So if they want to continue to earn their associate's or bachelor's degree, they'll have those college credits in their pocket. We, through apprenticeship, there's the mentor and employer support, and we do believe that that is a big piece of helping championing the success of the apprentice to complete the program. And we have developed all these resources to help the mentor and the sponsor successfully support their apprentice. Through the collaboration with Early Childhood Services Bureau, we have been able to lock in some funding to help support all of this. So building a program costs money, implementing the program costs money, and then also really taking the extra time to consider that the apprentices, mentors, and sponsors are putting into this professional development pathway. And so here is an overview of what the current financial structure is to support this CDA apprenticeship program. So this is a no-cost program for the apprentice, so they are not paying for any of the professional development. That is all covered through this funding. And they are also getting additional incentives to really kind of help encourage and be the carrot to get them through the program. It's paid out based on completions of the different components of the program. So once they finish their first class, the second class, and then the last incentive is after they have completed their CDA certificate. The CDA certification and the books are also covered. The mentor is putting in extra time and effort to support their apprentice, and we want to acknowledge that work. So they also get incentives to help encourage them to do a great job. We have developed a 20-hour advanced training for mentors. It's called Montana Mentors. It is also offered online, and we want to encourage and incentivize their time to complete that course, because we do believe that that will help support them to provide that high quality experience that we'd like for the apprentice to have. And then for the employer to help support that wage increase that is required through the apprenticeship program, they get up to $2,500 over 2 years to help with that wage increase. Again, this is funding through the Child Development Fund grant that comes into Early Childhood Services Bureau to specifically support professional development. Our high school program is really meant to meet the high school student and any sort of CTE programming that might or may not be available to the student, and really just the access to childcare. So we will provide the technical assistance to help make sure that all the components are there that are required to make it a certified pre-apprenticeship program, and really kind of do the background work to make sure that everything is moving along smoothly and that the high school student is supported to earn their high school or their CDA certification. And we also do have funding that is supporting that through Early Childhood Services Bureau. It's not as much for the adult program, but it is covering the cost for the student to earn their CDA certificate and the books. And then again, we want to recognize that extra effort that is getting paid to the mentor to support them. And that's all I have for you. Was that fast enough?
Very good. Not to dispel the rumor that we're rushed.
We still got an hour and 20 minutes before we need to through, so you have time. Don't feel like you can speed through things.
All right, very good. So we've heard the data, and I think the next step now is to hear about what this looks like in real life. So I'm going to ask Grace Decker from Montana Advocates for Children to come up, and she is going to moderate, a panel of people that are all impacted by the child care workforce. Should we have the whole panel? Just go ahead. I think that sounds good.
And so we'll invite the panelists to also come on up and we'll introduce them in just a second. While they are doing that,
Camera so that people online can see you and right here.
right through here.
Yeah.
Okay. So while the panelists are coming up, please, you can choose any spots if you'd like. I'll just go ahead and introduce myself while they get themselves settled, and then I'll take a minute to introduce all of them as well. So I know you've been sitting and listening for a long time. I started my career as a preschool teacher. I'm going to keep it stretch. How are we doing? Okay. So my name is Grace Decker, and I am the director of Montana Advocates for Children Coalition, which is Montana's statewide child care policy coalition. It consists of 15 statewide organizations who are all concerned with child care and its impact on children, families, and our state's economy. And I also engage in a tremendous amount of grassroots engagement with families and with providers all over the state. And I'm involved in helping organize providers to speak and advocate for themselves. My whole career has been in early childhood. I was a provider. I also was that parent who left the workforce when I couldn't find child care that I could afford for my own child. I was a coach and a consultant to child care programs, helping them try to figure out how to make it work. All the way along trying to answer that question, what is it going to take to get high quality early care and education to every single child in the state who wants it and needs it, and make sure that the people who are doing that work can make a career out of it? Just that, right? That's the question that we're really here to reckon with. And I'm so grateful to all the folks who've agreed to be on the panel today to help us explore that and really put a face on this problem. So with that, I'm going to introduce all of the panelists, and then you can hold your applause till the end. I'll just read all of their bios, and then you can go ahead and clap for all of them for their time being here today. So I'm going to start over. They're not sitting in the order that I wrote you down.
You said pick any seat.
I thought I was being cool, but instead I was tricking myself. So I'm going to start with Sally. You raise your hand. So Sally Hinkle is an occupational therapy graduate student and a parent of 2 young children, one of whom is only 2 months old. She has a professional background in the nonprofit sector, where she actually focused on early childhood initiatives and innovations. Her professional and personal experiences really inform her perspective on the opportunities and challenges that are facing young children and families. We also have with us Robert Farmer. Hi, Robert. Robert is a University of Montana graduate and holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Economics and MBA with a Human Resource Management emphasis. He is a nationally recognized trainer and has developed award-winning programs. And he's worked in the financial services industry for more than 25 years. Can I share what your current role is? Yeah. So Robert is currently the Executive VP of Human Solutions, did I get it right? People Solutions at Clearwater Credit Union here in Missoula. Thank you for being here. Then we have Leanne Downey-Economy with us. Leanne has been in the field of early childhood since 1989. She has a master's degree in early childhood studies with an emphasis in leadership and management. And she currently serves as the child care director for an employer-sponsored child care at Emmanuel Living Center in Kalispell. Sarah Schreiner is on the panel, and Sarah, I believe, to this group needs no introduction. But I think you might learn a little bit more about the ins and outs of what Sarah does every day when we hear from her perspective as a director of a large and successful center. And then finally, I'm really grateful that Dr. Brad Hall is participating on the panel as well. Dr. Hall, also part of your board, may not need much introduction, but he is a Blackfeet educational leader, historian, and researcher, raised on his family's ranch on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation, and his entire career has been spent strengthening education for the Blackfeet Nation. He's a graduate of Montana State University with a bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree, and he has served as a teacher, school administrator, and institutional researcher at Blackfeet Community College, chair of the Blackfeet Nation Institutional Review Board, and tribal outreach specialist at the University of Montana. And currently, Dr. Hall is the president of Blackfeet Community College. And I'm really grateful that he's able to add an important perspective from Indian country to our conversation today. And we have Cherise Jennings with us. And Cherise Jennings is currently the education coordinator for the Central Montana Child Care Alliance, where she's worked with communities and providers and families to start up childcare in rural Montana. With more than 20 years of experience as a teacher and a director and a professional development specialist, she really believes in supporting childcare businesses and helping rural communities grow. I'm paraphrasing. Okay, that is all of our panelists. Please welcome them with some applause. We're going to start this conversation by really getting down to the core, which is the child, right? So I wanted to start this conversation with a parent who has experienced very recently, and even right now, some of the challenges of being in a professional role and then adding children to the equation, right? So Sally, my questions to you really are, can you share with folks, what decisions did you have to make for your family when you were returning to the workforce after having your first kiddo? Take this on. Hello.
Great question. Thank you for having me. I'm sure there's also a lot of parents in the room navigating this, but I think there was a lot of backwards math that had to happen, which adds an immense cognitive load when you're already in parenthood and considering all the things about your child and decisions on a daily basis. And returning to work, I mean, there's logistics around your schedule, there's financial logistics, there's travel time, access, assuming that you have access to care, is it quality care, a lot of questions around that. And I think in Missoula, where I consider most of my basic needs to be in a 10 to 15 mile radius, when my son first went into childcare after I dropped out of the workforce and came back to the workforce, we had an hour-long commute one way, because that's all we could find, which in Missoula is wild to me. I was like, here's traffic. I'm in traffic in Missoula, an hour to drop my son off and an hour to pick him up, which completely distorted our daily routine. We lived really far from where we were going to care, so we had to leave work early. We had to decide who was gonna leave work early, whose day it was. We had meetings. There was just, it was an endless game of who's gonna do what between my husband and I, on top of the financial cost, which was a lot of money.
So did you feel, Sally, like the barriers and challenges that you were facing were unique to your family, or among the other families that you were in connection with, did you feel like they were more typical?
They're more typical. And we had care that was unreliable at times, and that was echoed throughout our whole community, where people were having to switch childcares repeatedly throughout their careers or drop out of the workforce. And starting over somewhere, it's a lot. It's a big transition. It's inconsistency for your kid. It's a lot more responsibility for you, the paperwork, the drop off, getting to know the providers again. I mean, you're starting all over, which is just a huge disruption across the board in your life as a parent. And young children who really rely on that consistency of care, it can be really disruptive to their routine as well.
Can you remember, for example, a time when your child care created unreliability, let's say, when you needed to like adjust?
Oh, yes. A couple times. When my son was born, I was on leave, and when I was coming back, we couldn't find care, and we had to make a hard decision of what we were gonna do at this crossroads and what was the best economic decision. So I dropped out of the workforce at that time and stayed with my son. And then when I found a really wonderful job that I was really excited about in early care and education, and took the job and then let them know I didn't have infant care, secured infant care, and it fell through 4 months into the job, which just, overnight thwarted us back into this position that was very stressful. I think we talk a lot about the numbers and the financial and the economic impact, but what we don't talk enough about is the quality of life impact that happens when there's a lot of childcare disruption, there's a lot of stress. And for me personally, to be the best person, parent, spouse, worker that I can be, I need to work. We are a dual income household, but I also want to work. It's a huge part of my identity. It's something that I take pride in. And so you get all tangled up in productivity and showing up in all these different ways, and that takes a really big hit when childcare is not reliable.
Thanks so much, Sally. I appreciate that. And when there are problems for an employee, someone who wants to be at work like Sally, that means problems for the employer, right? When Sally's childcare fell through, that didn't only impact her family, although that impact was significant. And so I want to turn to that employer perspective, and I'm going to ask Robert, how have you seen these childcare challenges really impact your team members at Clearwater, impacts around your ability to hire and retain folks?
Yeah, end of the day, it really does impact our ability to retain employees, and it's really high quality employees. So I've been in my role for about 13 years now, and over the last 13 years, I have seen more and more parents just decide to quit. And it's men and women. I think we normally think it's the mom, but I've now started to see it as well. And a lot of parents deciding to not return from their leave. So they have a child, it's often a second child or a third child. They do their 12 weeks of FMLA, and about week 10 or 11, they call me and they say, I'm running the numbers, right? And I'm really, really sorry. I love my job. I love the credit union, but for my family, I need to quit, right? We can't afford childcare. There's also an impact on just showing up, absenteeism. So, I've seen just an increase in tardiness. A minor daycare shift can make a parent 5 minutes late for work, right? Or 10 minutes late for work. Or, hey, I was just notified my daycare is going to close at 4 on Fridays, right? Those sorts of challenges that are creating a lot of stress for parents, right? And that stress shows up in the workplace. An endless list of requests for schedule accommodations, right? Is can I work, instead of 8 to 5 on Thursday, can I work 8 to 4? Or even like 8:15 to 5. Little changes make a big difference for folks. The other thing, and this is back to leave, but more and more employees who have the intent to return from leave, I get a phone call again about week 10 or 11 of their FMLA leave, and they say, hey, Robert, I've got daycare secured, but I'm going to need another 2 to 3 weeks of leave because the spot I had isn't ready for me. Something changed in the daycare, and that 2 to 3 weeks of extra leave is often them trying to plug gaps with family members, right? So that happens a lot. On the hiring side, it's a little harder because I don't hear a lot. I assume there are people who would want to work for us but don't apply because they can't meet the hours requirements. But it does show up often when we go to make an offer, and the applicant or the person we want to hire needs a unique schedule, right? So it might be a role that's 8:30 to 5. They can't start till 9, right? Because of other childcare issues. So those are the most common things I see.
And so I know that there's going to be an opportunity for this board to dig a lot more deeply into solutions and innovations, but would you be willing to just share a little bit about what Clearwater is doing about some of those?
Yep, for sure. First, this really has nothing to do with our efforts in daycare, but I do think it speaks to just us as an employer, and this helps with daycare, and that is that Clearwater is a living wage employer, and we do follow the MIT living wage calculator to help us set starting wages, and that helps. It's still pretty low, folks. I looked it up for Missoula for 2026, Missoula County, for a single person with no kids, the living wage is $23.85, right? So we do that. It does help, but I think there's more we can do. But I think the biggest thing Clearwater does is that we really understand the struggle for parents, and we do what we can to be as flexible as possible. So we always try to do the schedule change. for the schedule accommodation. We've done job sharing before because we had two new moms who came to me and said, hey, we want to share our job. Can we do that? And I said yes, right? And it worked. It was super, super slick. The other big thing we've done is for years, employees would ask about us starting a daycare. And all the time we say no. And one year I said, this was probably 2022, I said, I can't keep saying no, right? Like, it's just not gonna fly anymore. So I stood up an internal childcare task force that looked at all of the options, right? So they went down the rabbit hole of starting our own. They called every daycare in Missoula to understand the business model. We looked at subsidizing it, and in the end, we felt that the best option for us was to join the Missoula Child Care Advantage program, which not only helped our employees, but also helped the community with the issue as well.
What is that?
The Missoula Child Care Advantage, Sally was the sort of helped me with it, but the Missoula Child Care Advantage is a program set up through 0 to 5 in Missoula United Way, which is basically a co-op of childcare providers. So it started with, I think, 7 or 8. They live or were housed in an old school. Missoula Public Schools offers them cheap rent. And then employers can join this program and your employees get access to the wait list. So there's more to the business model, but I won't eat at the time.
That's great. I do know that this board is going to be doing a deep dive into lots of innovative strategies from all across the state. Caitlin mentioned a couple of other innovations that have been happening. And so I know there's going to be an opportunity to get more into that as well. But I do want to ask now to Leanne, because Clearwater has done some really creative things to respond to what they were hearing from their employees. And I know that Leanne's employer, Emmanuel Living, also went through a process of discerning what their employees needed. And Leanne, you are the director of an employer-sponsored childcare program. Can you share a little bit about what led Emmanuel Living to launch that initiative?
Sure. Emmanuel had really started to look at retaining and retention of recruiting and retaining quality staff for their senior living community, and sparked the idea of housing and childcare and all of the things that we live in the valley are challenging. So our CEO started talking to local churches about a new Sunday school space. Then COVID shut down the world. We came back to life, and ARPA came out with all this funding. Kind of when I stepped into the picture. Together we wrote an ARPA grant and received a fairly significant grant, which enabled us to get burn roots up and running. We are a benefit to Emmanuel employees, which means they get top priority on our wait list. They also receive an employer benefit. It's not like a free thing, it's a taxable benefit amount that helps pay, but a full-time employee is getting a benefit amount of about $525 a month, which isn't quite half, but it certainly makes a big difference in the ability for people to be able to afford care.
Thanks. And so I'm wondering, have there been other challenges that have emerged along the way? I'm really thrilled that Leanne is here because she really has a foot in both worlds, from that employer perspective and also from the perspective of someone who's working in the trenches of providing childcare. She's really got both of those hats. So can you share whether there have been other challenges along the way as Emmanuel Living, which is a senior living facility, has started to dip its toe into childcare?
It definitely has not come without growing pains. But I think it's been a huge learning curve in compromise and negotiating two different businesses coming together and merging. I think that the main challenge has been quote unquote fairness from an HR perspective. How do you treat nursing staff versus childcare staff? And how do we come to common denominators with that? And I think that we are doing a fairly good job. Sometimes a little more frustrating to get there than others. But for the most part, I think that we're doing a pretty good job of coming up with those compromises.
Thanks, Leanne. And you were able to add new spaces into your community. And thinking back to the data that Amy shared from about the gap in available childcare in the state, that's a really significant benefit that you're providing to the community as well. Of course, with so much demand for childcare, you would think everyone would be jumping all over themselves to open more childcare slots. But that isn't what's happening, and in fact, many childcare programs aren't even able to operate at full capacity. The capacity they have on paper may not be the capacity they're actually serving. And I want to get a little deeper into this question of what's going on behind all of this. Why? Why is this a broken business model? Why is this such a tough nut to crack? And so Sarah, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about what it looks like on the ground and what might limit your ability to continue to expand or offer the services that you might want to.
So I would say right now, the biggest barrier that we are facing is system bottlenecks. So examples of that, and I know Jason alluded to this earlier, but when I hire a new employee, it often takes anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks for me to get them approved to work in the center. So I have two options. I start paying them to try to keep them, right? And that's money that we've just thrown away. And when most childcare programs in Montana are operating, if they're doing really well, they're operating at a 10% profit margin. 15% would be amazing, but we don't see that very often. And so right now I'm losing 25% of my new hires. They never actually start because it takes so long for the paperwork to happen and for it to be approved. Now, it hasn't always been that way. There was a time when I believe there was more ARPA funding, and so there were more licensing techs that were able to process paperwork in a more timely manner. But right now, with the number of licensing techs, I believe they each have over 300 licenses that they're managing independently. So a program like mine, that most of my locations have 20 to 30 employees, you have to think about that for each of my centers. We have just, or close to 50 employees just between my 3 locations. So, and one person would be managing the paperwork. And then if I'm having to submit 4 applications just to get 3, there's this constant revolving door of me trying to get people approved and in the door. The other thing that has been a barrier is obviously the cost of childcare that continues to go up, and it's hard for families, but also our highest profit classrooms, which are our oldest classrooms because we have the most children per teacher in those age groups. That was typically our pre-K classroom. We have seen a dramatic decrease in those numbers because we now have free public pre-K in our community. So our classrooms that used to make up the difference for us not making money or losing money on infants and toddlers, now all of a sudden those kids have gone. And you can't blame parents for choosing an option, especially when in our program most parents are paying $1,500 a month per child for childcare just to cover. So by the time they get to 4 years old, you betcha that they're either sending them to the public pre-K or choosing to repeat 2 years of kindergarten because their child might not be quite ready, but that's a huge savings for their family. 2 more. Childcare is not viewed as a career path by most people. And so even with the apprenticeship program, it's very challenging to get people into the apprenticeship program when you're going to leave that program making maybe $20 an hour if you're exceptional, phenomenal, and your classroom is fully enrolled. And so it's very hard when you roll out apprenticeship opportunities. You can be a plumber and you're going to leave the plumbing apprenticeship program making significantly more. So I think we need to be looking at, can we have apprenticeship programs for directors, for administrative roles, where now all of a sudden we're leaving making more money. But the last thing that I'll leave you with, and this is, again, Jason and his team alluded to this, is the increasing insurance costs. Last year for all of my programs, our insurance rates were $30,000 for the year. This year, we are up over $65,000, and we have had 0 deficiencies. We've had 0 license. We've had 100% licensing. Yes, knock on wood, right? My team's that good though, really. So I'm not that worried. But that was just money that overnight, within a week period, we had to figure it out. And looking at how can we fix that? Can we, and how can we really support providers in those expenses that we had zero control over that. That is not one of the costs that we could, and we had to get some of our insurance from over in Europe. We couldn't even get it here in the United States because they wouldn't cover, all the insurance companies are pulling out because childcare is too risky of a business. And in my perspective, it's too risky not to be in that business.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm thinking about one barrier that I didn't hear you speak to, but we do know that in Montana, anywhere between 1 in 3 to 1 in 2 people who are working in childcare today will not be a year from now. Right, so with that level of churn in the industry, recruitment and retention is certainly a problem that I hear about a lot. And I'm wondering what that looks like among your staff, like what you think about the challenge of recruitment and retention, and what you hear from your colleagues who are also directors.
So we too see a lot of turnover. We have our core group of people who this is their mission, and they have been with our organization for 5 years plus, and they continue to move it forward. But what we hear all the time, I would say, with our staff of close to 50 employees, at least once a month, we're getting some sort of notice that says, I love my job, I don't want to quit, but I'm going to go work somewhere else because of the money, the benefits, etc. And I also hear this job is really stressful and really overwhelming, and I'm not getting paid enough to do this work. And so as much as we would love to say it's all about culture and people are going to, if you make it a wonderful place that they will stay. If they're making $15 an hour though, the math has to math, right? And a lot of our employees. Now, we do have those who childcare is often their second income stream in the household, especially if they have children where they can receive some sort of childcare discount. Most providers are giving that because a person in the body with 50% tuition is still better than no teacher. So those employees tend to stay, but almost always the minute that their kiddos go off to school, then they transition to a different industry because the math no longer, you go backwards, just like you were saying. All of a sudden, it was great, I was getting $500 a month in tuition credit, but then my kid left, and guess what? I didn't get a $500 a month raise, right? So.
Yeah, and of course, that $500 per child for staffed children is coming right out of the bottom line, and ability to then, increase wages or pay for that insurance or anything else.
Mm-hmm. And it's my understanding that because we're a childcare industry, we can't claim the same tax credit that other businesses could. So if any of you were to give $500 for your employees, you would be able to do the 45F program, but we cannot do that with our own business.
Thanks so much. And so I'm going to shift gears yet again and talk about our rural communities in the state. Because when there's a problem that everyone in the state experiences, it looks a little different in small town Montana. And so I'm going to ask for Cherise, who's based in Lewistown but works with many surrounding communities. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities of rural childcare?
Sure. I actually am just coming off vacation today, so I'm trying to get back in the group. So I had to type out what I was going to say, so I have vacation break. So a little closer, excuse me. Well, I have a unique privilege. I get to work with, like she said, a lot of providers in our area. We're very rural. We serve 4 counties. In fact, I would say frontier might be a better description. With the Child Care Alliance, Central Montana Child Care Alliance, we have actually been very successful. I'll give you a little history. It's actually a large center director, and in Lewistown we had 1 large center and 1 medium-sized center, and that medium-sized center was going to close, and we really didn't want to stop because our plate was full, but that would be 60 families out of here with nowhere to go. So we took on the second site. Business owners, our Port Authority, our economic development at the time came and said, what's going on? I mean, even my wait list was 88 kids at the time. And so we looked at the opportunity to maybe open a 3rd site, and it was a huge nut to crack. And we decided to eventually shut down that program, or just shut down the idea, I should say. We were a board, we had we're a nonprofit with a very active board even, who usually probably could move that mountain, even they, I think, got a realization for how difficult it can be. to crack that nut. So at the time Port Authority came back to us and said, I think workforce, I think these employers need to get involved. And so it's sort of the inception of this idea, this local coalition started. And we did get a little bit of money to do a community study. We did that, got some good information, and then things just sat at a standstill for a couple of years until the innovation grant came out through the state of Montana. And we were able to apply and get, I think we're the smallest of the awards, but not to toot my own horn, but I think that we had the biggest impact. We have opened 17 new programs. We've offered 207 new childcare spots. And what I've discovered is it's not even opening that's the hard part. It's really keeping them and maintaining them and sustaining them. So I think when you're thinking about this childcare crisis, you probably do have some more examples of like Missoula or whatever, that the wait lists are very long, and we certainly have experienced that too. But I would say in rural Montana, the barriers are beginning a lot earlier. For example, just an available building, honestly, is the toughest nut to crack. The buildings that exist need extensive renovation. They rarely meet fire code, or if there is one that comes available that is nice, the rent far exceeds the budget of a childcare. Or honestly, the childcare providers themselves are not financially stable enough to even move on something fast enough. At least in Lewistown, we're seeing extensive growth, and you can't even move on a building quick enough to be competitive. Lewistown is the largest community we serve. In fact, 2 of the counties that we open childcare and were complete childcare deserts with no childcare at the time. And yeah, it doesn't matter what community we go to, it feels like finding a suitable space has been very difficult. So what we've really learned, I think, is that rural childcare doesn't succeed because you have one extraordinary caregiver. It succeeds because this entire town, this entire community is coming around, and they think it's worth protecting. So I think we've seen some really innovative things. Schools who are willing to donate classrooms, churches who are willing to provide a low-cost rent, counties. We're working with a county right now who is, they just built a new hospital, so they're going to donate the use of their old physical therapy space in their old hospital with free rent, utilities, and things like that to help this project get off the ground. We wrote a grant to help them, got $38,000 to fill it up with new supplies. So it really has just taken this very on-the-ground grassroots approach. We've partnered with other nonprofits. We've heard a lot today that a lot of childcares love kids, but maybe the business side is hard for them, and so making them sustainable by umbrellaing them under the existing nonprofit so they can have that administrative support has been really great. We've worked with a lot of employers. In fact, our organization, my colleague Jennifer, she's not here today, by trade she is a grant writer, so she's very good at this in general. But we have written, we actually ourselves gave away about $140,000 in pass-through money from our innovation grant. And since then, we've written another $500,000 in grants for our childcare providers and have brought that money to our communities. But even outside of that, we helped 10 different employers apply for the 0 to 5 employer grants. And so I think just this level of hand-holding is really needed. And again, I have to say that I can't think of a single successful project that wasn't a community partnership. But even after the program opens, which is a heavy lift on its own, that sustainability becomes an immediate challenge. So the rural communities, they really don't grow in straight lines. So I'll give you just one example that stands out to me is, Winnett, for example, a really tiny town of a few hundred people, and they had 10 babies being born a year. We decided to help them open a childcare. Well, guess what? Those 10 babies have sustained the childcare. And guess who's going to kindergarten this fall? And guess how many kids are below them? 4, and 2 of them are moving because the superintendent's changing. So they're going to have 2 kids. Well, there's 3 other people who are pregnant. They want that childcare around in a year. What are they going to do with this year? Well, I'll tell you what they do. They close. And then they start over. They lose their stuff. They give away all their stuff. And so you do see this constant, just revolving door of constantly opening and closing, especially in those lean years. So something that I think rural programs struggle with most is just the consistent enrollment opportunities in general. I mean, sometimes there's the kids there that year. So, but then it becomes that expensive cycle and somebody has to continue to figure it out. So another thing I've been increasingly aware of, I think, is all of the current funding opportunities we've seen as of late. They just don't really match the realities of what we're seeing on the ground. So there's a lot of funding, or has been, around expansion. So adding classrooms, increasing enrollment, extending your hours, opening a new program. purchasing equipment and technology. And I think those are valuable investments, especially in areas where growth is possible. But in many of the communities we're serving with 300 to 500 people, they already have all the kids, you know. So their challenge isn't expansion, in my opinion. It's, you know, I go to programs all the time, which I think is happening less than ever lately. And I have yet to have one program come and say, boy, if I could just buy one more tablet with that technology grant. Boy, if I could acquire one more pack and play for that infant grant, I will really keep my doors open. Right? They're not saying that. In fact, they're saying, I want to pay my teachers. You know, I need to be able to sustain and keep the doors open when I go from 10 kids to 2 kids next year, so I can get it back up to 5 or 6 the following year. A lot of our providers, I was going to say approaching, but I'm going to say I think they're already in free fall off of a funding cliff. They weathered enormous changes over the last several years. They've lost a lot of the supports that were stabilizing them. STARS incentives and things like that. Access to scholarship has been harder, especially rural. What we really find there is almost none of our rural communities can get in on a scholarship. If you're a farmer or rancher and you have a $100,000 tractor, your depreciation counts and you're out. And so that's also where the current incentives are tied to. If you're going to be a part of the new Montana Treasures, you get a bonus for taking these scholarship kids. Well, you guys we get no bonus here, right? Not very fair in my opinion. So I think we have to rethink some of that. But again, I just don't think it's time to shift our focus from sustaining what we already have. I think it's actually time to double down on sustaining the programs we have. So I think if you really want to truly strengthen Montana's workforce, just again, not just creating childcare, but sustaining the programs we have and truly investing in the quality of those programs, which has been a concern of mine lately. Yeah, every closure means losing experienced teachers, trusted relationships. I'll describe another project we had, one that actually got one of the employer grants. This was a school, and they had 3 teachers come to them and say, we are quitting next year if you don't address childcare. Figure it out. They called us. We said, well, you know, with this grant, let's talk. So we helped them apply the school as the employer. They were really generous. They donated a beautiful house, one of their teacher houses, which is hard for them to give up. And so they're providing free rent. We were able to furnish the place with the grant from 0 to 5. We worked really closely alongside them. Well, of the 3 teachers, 2 of them are using it. They were even paying through this grant for a year or 2. I think they got a renewal, paying to even access the childcare. And some of the teachers who demanded it still didn't come over. And when we talked to them about it, what's going on here? You're driving an hour away. You demanded this care. They're too scared. It's been too volatile. It has open, closed, and the last time it closed, kind of like you said earlier, you know, the last time it closed, it took them over 5 months to get another slot, and they're too scared to give it up. So then what we see is lately, people sitting back and watching and waiting. Is this gonna stick around? Can we trust it? And so I think even things like that, if we could make these more sustainable, it might really help kind of build that trust as well. So again, I don't think it's funding alone, although money really certainly doesn't hurt, but I think it's the communities and doing things at the local level. You know, none of the 17 programs we opened, they didn't come because they filled out an online application or called a statewide help desk. They were looking for people who were local and knowledgeable and really willing to hold their hand, sit at the kitchen table, be there for weeks, months, years. Some of these projects have taken on a daily basis. You know, it's not just completing the paperwork. We help them find the building, navigate the licensing, coordinate with community partners. We're working with, you know, our chamber, our port authority, our zoning, fire, our corporate development. A lot of things, you know, solving unexpected roadblocks, recruiting staff for them, helping them with enrollment, advertising, and like I said, spending months or years right next to them to create that sustainable business. So it's very relationship driven.
It is, and it's such impressive work that you've been doing in your area. I get to hear Sharice share about her work fairly regularly because her organization is a member of our coalition. And I could listen to you talk about that work for a long time, but we do need to shift gears. And I want to pass the mic down to Dr. Hall at the end of the table because I am really eager to hear what has been coming up so far is really resonating for you. I'm grateful that you're here to add your perspective about childcare in tribal communities and what really would support the families and businesses in your area best.
Well, the thing about me is when you ask the question, you get the answer. So buckle in, here we go. vast majority, I'm gonna speak from the Blackfeet Nation perspective. I can't speak for all tribes or all entities. And I'm also speaking as an employer. In conversations I've had with faculty, staff, and students, and also with our partner that we have on campus. We do have a licensed facility on our campus. So the vast majority of childcare that occurs on our reservation is not through certified childcare services. With a very large extended family structure that tends to be typical for tribal communities, people are going to find childcare wherever they can get it versus having the luxury to be able to wait for an opening or have those things going on. And that is, I don't view that as a deficit, I view that as a strength. Where it's a deficit is that the individuals that are performing that service could be certified, they could be expanding in a business model, but it's just not happening because all of the factors around childcare are actually, and what the reason they're gravitating toward that model is because the flexibility, it's because people are at home to provide that service versus it being a facility that has the standards that we need. One of the things that we've also done with the college is we've had to make some adjustments to our employee policies. Taking one word from our employees who have informed that process is that a lot of them are needing accommodations for remote work arrangements, right? Children get sick, leave sometimes long extended periods of time. And that's also compounded with elder care as well, which often is just as resident as for people that are getting services for children. We've also relaxed our policy on children in the workplace. We use the word reasonable. And, so that really makes a big difference because when people don't have family to rely on, in which many of our staff actually are the sole provider of children, that is a big thing. And then, at 2:30, 3 o'clock, they're getting off the bus. Kids can come in and be on campus. They can. In fact, we feel like they're going to be future students anyway, so they might as well get a foot in the door. For the childcare services, the vast majority of the people receiving services are block grant or subsidized because they meet income requirements. But the moment you get your education, the moment you get a better job, those things go away. And yet it doesn't always cover the $800 to $900 a month it takes for a 3 to 5 year old, or $1,000 to $1,250 it takes for a 0 to 3 year old. I would also say that although on the facility on our campus, everyone is certified, it does take a while. When new people come in, attrition happens. But when we think about the life cycle of a person in early childhood, they're also hitting a ceiling when it comes to getting higher education beyond what the college can offer. But online resources, online applications, things like that are really helpful. And those are provided a lot of cover for a lot of those access issues. Our childcare operates right on our campus, and we as the college subsidize that facility. So they don't pay rent. They also don't pay for their electricity, but they do pay for some of their internet and other basic services. So we saw that as a huge benefit because every fall and spring semester, they do a roundup of faculty and staff that may be having children or have the need for childcare. And they will reserve up to 20 slots out of the 40 that they're certified to serve for college faculty, staff, and students. And then if they don't fill up within the 3rd week of school, they are then open to people in the community to do that. So that's been working pretty well. But again, it ebbs and flows, right? Sometimes it's more needed, sometimes it's less needed based on individual circumstance. Childcare is the #1 barrier to reasons to why people don't go to college at our college. So we've done a lot of things with remote learning that have helped with that. So they can attend a course synchronously while they're at home performing childcare as a parent. And oftentimes, excuse me, some of those accommodations tend to be basic needs. And in our analysis of what our students need, childcare is then followed by transportation, then followed by financial resources. So all these things compound into ways that allow for us to have to think innovatively about how we do that. And our current MOA is for a 5-year period, so it's reviewed about every halfway through. And really takes it onto a life of its own, especially because this is not an industry that's fixed. It's very changing, evolving. Another dynamic that occurs a lot in our community are grandparents raising grandchildren and foster children. And although there are programs that exist, they're hard to navigate, and tribal court systems don't always accommodate for parents who are trying to get services when those are required to get block grants and access, etc. Facilities are, again, you've heard that a lot today. There really is no funding that I know of to help with our child care facility. And so the college is actually subsidizing the facilities cost as well as the maintenance and all the other things. We've invested some of our own COVID-19 dollars, about $340,000, into shoring up the facility so that it's ready for the students that are there. And they serve 0 to 5 in 2 separate classrooms. We find that staffing is really inconsistent, mainly because of that ceiling I'm talking about, being able to get into a different vocation, like in the school district where they pay more, there's benefits, and there's all these other things. So people are going where the money is, mostly out of necessity. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is the cost of living on reservations is much higher. Groceries, electricity, all these things, and it's getting higher. Electricity has increased 5% in the last year, and these kind of costs are really what you cannot budget toward, especially when it's so dynamic and things are happening in such a fast pace. And so that turnover contributes to a lot of people that they bring in not meeting standards for childcare. And those that integrate into training systems, they usually go to the Head Start program because they pay more and have those same benefits. But when you think about the college's investment in that program, it probably would not be in operation if we did not invest the way that we do.
You know, I'm actually thinking this might be a good spot for us to press pause, because I think many of you are probably been hearing some themes in what folks have been sharing. With the broken business model that exists in the child care industry, I heard over and over and over how important it is to kind of bring something else into that equation, which is exactly what an innovation-focused board is here to be thinking about. And so we're actually going to do our last question to the board, but then we're going to turn it to you. You've been listening, digesting, and we're going to have you actually do some thinking and talking for just a few minutes with your neighbors next to you to uplift the top ideas that are standing out to you. Before we do that, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to share just literally a sentence or two, and I wish we had a lot more time for all of you, to answer the question, what is something that could be done to innovate around the child care industry to support Montana's workforce? Like, from where you sit, from your perspective, what is it that could be done? And I'll pass this mic to you, Sharice, and we're gonna go right down the line with your answers.
Oh, too much. Sit down.
Nope, you're first. I actually have 4 recommendations, so I'll stick around if you'd like to hear more. But I do think for investment at the local level, people to be right there, neighbors, friends, people to really get those community projects right off the ground.
For me, I think it's anything we can do around wages for daycare workers. And what really sparked that for me today was Sarah talking about her turnover. And in the world of HR, to estimate the cost of turnover, it's 1.5 times that person's wage. And that's a conservative estimate. So I think in daycare, it's probably higher than that. So that is a huge impact for our providers.
Yeah, I second that. I think not only wages, but I also think more focus on allowing childcare workers to get best beginning scholarships to be able to afford, when we learned what the average salary is, for them to be able to afford to come to work and bring their own kids as well.
I would also echo that, even as a
Is this on? Yes, it's dying maybe. As a parent, even though I'm paying a lot for childcare and it's worth it, I think you do have to start at the root of really addressing wages and sustainability of folks in the field for quality care, and that will trickle down to parents and families and children.
I think the top priority needs to be really analyzing the current systems that we have and seeing, are they operating as efficiently as they could be operating? Be thinking about potential tax benefits within our state for employers to help sponsor childcare. And then also I would love to see tort reform for the insurance side of things, because we have it in the medical side of things, but we do not have any kind of tort reform for childcare.
So I think pathways beyond, I think we've done a good job with a lot of online resources that have been really accessible. However, I think from CPR training, those are pretty inconsistent in rural Montana. So to have people up to par to do that. The other resonating thing that I would really emphasize is that the capacity for these centers to serve children with special needs is very limited. And those things really take a lot of time, energy, and specialized training to make sure that they're serving those students the best they can.
I'll turn that one off. It was dying.
Is it dying?
Yeah.
This one's not.
Okay, so, now it's on. Now it's on. So we are going to turn this to you. And because, like I said, I was a preschool teacher, I firmly believe that the people who are talking and engaging are the ones who are like learning and processing the information. So we're actually going to ask that you talk with your neighbors for about 5-7 minutes about what you've been hearing today and what's coming up for you. We have some index cards that we'll be bringing around, and we're going to ask for you to gather in like threes if you can, if that's not too inconvenient, to kind of turn to the side. And then you're going to write down a question from your group. When we get back together with everyone, we'll try to have the panel answer as many of those as we can get to. And if we don't get to all of them, or if you have more than one question that you want to write down, we are going to invite the panel to help us answer these questions via email, so that you have their answers to those and for your thoughts before your next meeting when you'll dig a little deeper into solutioning. Okay? Everyone understand what the task is for the next, let's say, let's go 6 minutes, we'll split the difference. Okay, thanks. All right, so I'm looking for a group that's ready, and you can like hold your card up if you're ready, and I'll bring the mic so you can ask your own question to the panel. Looking for a group that wants to ask their question. Okay, do you have a question though?
So we had a wide ranging discussion that resulted in nothing on the card. I'm just gonna paraphrase, maybe it's a twofold question, you know, and I don't know, I'm not asking for an answer, it was just very high level, but do we need to look at a different model? Not just from the business perspective, but also how do we think differently about a different partnership model when it comes to insurance services?
And facility.
Yep, and facilities as well.
Thanks. That's a very large question. I'm looking at the panel and they're all like, That might be more of a exploration item for this board, right? A research topic?
The answer is yes, though we do need to look at other.
One thing that was mentioned was insurance issues, and we said, well, maybe the state of Montana needs to look at stop loss insurance or, catastrophic insurance or something like that, reinsurance, something. So there's still some skin in the game, but you don't have to go to Lloyd's of London to get insurance.
Thanks, guys. Okay, where's another group who has a question for the panel? Thanks.
Ours, again, is a large question, which I think are the right questions you need to be asking, right? And so our question is, what is childcare in Montana?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of facets to that, there's a lot of pieces to that, things we keep hearing about are not disappearing, and they're not gonna disappear if we only look at insurance. It's gonna leave all the other parts of it. And so we were talking about how if we only start to really think about what exactly are we trying to fix, we're not just putting Band-Aids all over.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want these?
Do you want to give what's? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the question of what is childcare in Montana and how do we actually approach all of it? Is that sparking a thought for anyone on the panel that you'd like to reflect on?
I think that it's multifold. I think
Hearing
that
this, because they need to hear you online.
I can talk loud, sorry. I think one of the things in my personal professional opinion is that if we really start shifting the focus of childcare from being daycare, which I think is viewed as babysitting, and really ranked down in the order of professionalism, and we could really shift that focus to early childhood education, and those of us that are very educated in providing quality care and employing people that are providing quality care and want to keep them employed in quality care. I think if we could kind of shift the pendulum and the way of thinking, that we might be able to establish a higher rank on the priority list throughout the state and the nation for that matter.
I was hoping you would take the mic, Sarah.
I actually keep thinking about something that Representative Carrie Seekins-Crow posted on her social media. And she was saying how important it is for parents to be able to make the right decision for their child. And I think that when you ask that question, what is childcare in Montana, we can't forget that each family, each parent needs to be able to make the right choice for their family, their child, and sometimes, and it will be different in every season of life. So sometimes that's grandparents and that's extended family, family and friends. Sometimes it's licensed childcare, but we, as a state, it needs to be something that we are committed to as a whole.
Thank you. Lots more juicy conversation to have there.
Thank you, Sarah. That's really great. I think that's one piece of what we were talking about is if we're going to come at this from a systems perspective, the question, what is childcare, is not only where does it fit into this continuum of parent choice and the kind of childcare you want, but truly what is it? Is it a public benefit? Is it part of the educational system? Is it an employer benefit, just like PTO and HR? Once we can hone in on what it is, because right now we're trying to solve the whole system for 3 or 4 different what it is with the same kind of patchwork solution. And it's a question I think all of you on this board know I've been asking for 4 years. What is it? And what is it in Montana?
Okay, I think there are a couple of groups who haven't had a chance to share their questions.
So I think that our question is a little bit more around models that are working. And we heard a lot about bigger organizations getting involved in solving some of the cost issues that healthcare providers have. You know, one organization that's statewide are K-12 districts. And so are there good models where K-12 districts are either helping on work-based learning employee pipeline issues or helping on facilities or employee benefits that folks can highlight, and how are those replicable perhaps?
Cherise, would you want to take that one and talk about, or I'm thinking also about,
It's been a minute.
yeah, okay, Cherise, maybe there's one K-8 or K-12 school district that's coming to mind as a really successful partnership between a child care program and a school?
Yeah, we've opened 7 childcares in schools, and every single project is different. Not one of them really looks the same. I think they have all the schools, it's been beneficial to them because it has helped them recruit teachers and retain them. In fact, one of our schools opened a childcare because they lost their music teacher to the neighboring town because they would give her childcare, so they're even fighting for staff that way. I think they recognize the need in the community for it, and then also that they really have the only usable space a lot of times in those, at least in the rural towns. But the schools have been a very good partner, yeah, and I think that it's a model that you could certainly replicate other places. But like I said, I could give you lots of examples, I think, and not one single one of them looks the same. Some are run by the school employees giving, using their administrative person to actually admin. Some are setting up a nonprofit or privately renting for even getting free rent from the school, but are a separate entity. Some are for-profit. Yeah, really unique. So I'd be happy to. I think I actually have a one-pager of all the schools we've worked with and a little blurb about all of their projects that is just fascinating. I think just not one of them are the same.
Thanks. Another question? Well, like our neighbors, we honestly didn't come up with the question. But we did have a good conversation, and Casey and I both come from the healthcare sector. So we have a unique challenge where we're open 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Yes.
And so that's unique in itself. But what we're finding is that a lot of the younger families are being really creative in regards to how they fill those holes. And so they might have a partner who's an RN or an LPN or a clinical person who can work night shift, and they take care of them during the day or it's part of the day. So we see a lot of creativity in there, and I think that goes back to the question at the end of the table is what is childcare in the state of Montana? And I think we need to avoid being really cookie cutter about it, because every family, every community is very different on what their needs are, and I don't think we're going to find one solution, would be my thought. I mean, listening to all of you, you have all very different solutions. So sorry for not a question, but some thoughtful dialogue on our end.
Thank you, and really speaks to the importance of looking for those examples. I'm thinking back to the question that was asked before about neighboring states, and when we see that it's working better elsewhere, like what are they doing that we're not doing, for example?
Good segue into our conversation because we addressed that. If you look at one of the pressures on childcare, there's a correlation, not causation, but a correlation to cost of living. Wyoming is 9% below the national average for cost of living. North Dakota is about on par. Montana is high. So that creates pressure within the community for everyone to be employed, young mothers and their older generation. But one thing that resonated in our group was what what Brad shared. Hopefully I did that right. With multi-generational communities, multi-generational family units working with young people. Either all of us had an experience here of doing that or are currently doing that. Is there a role in the definition of what is childcare that includes encouraging our older generation to engage?
Another fantastic question, and I will give a quick answer which is that there is one category in the official licensing that deals with relative care, and of course we know how important that familial care is for some families. And then also we know how transient today's population is, much more so than when many of us were children. Many folks who moved to Montana don't have those wonderful extended family networks close by, which really reflects that childcare, this question of what is childcare and what are we solving for is such a good one. There's not one solution that's going to work for all. And we need to figure out, with the help of folks like this and with all of you, what's going to make it go better. Is there one more group that hasn't asked their question yet? Because I know we need to save time for a little bit of public comment. Did everybody ask their question? Okay, then if that's the case, I think I'll hand this off to the chair. Oh, after we thank our panel one more time.
Thank you. Thank you for the great discussion. Before we open to public comment, are there any comments from board members over the last couple hours before we close out today? Seeing none, I will take public comment in the room. Seeing none, I've got one. Rachel from Montana After School Alliance, you are recognized.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Rachel Wonderscheid. I'm the director of the Montana After School Alliance. We're an intermediary organization that works with kids that are over 5 years old. So we're actually very similar to 0 to 5, but we serve programs that are working again with 5 and over. So we kind of consider that 5 to Thrive. These programs are often boys and girls clubs, summer programs, those that are based in churches, those that are subject specific, sometimes museums or libraries. And some of them serve these younger ages, but some of them are mixed and many are just these over 5. And when you're asking this question of what is childcare in Montana, these programs are often left out of the conversation. They are actually not seamlessly integrated into the early child care system, nor are they seamlessly integrated into the education system. And yet they are lifeline programs for many of our families across the state. And all of the problems that you have discussed today are also a challenge for this specific sector. And so I wanted to speak up for them and to let you know that I'm hoping that they can continue to be a part of this conversation. And I could go into all those challenges and specific needs of this sector in a presentation about the same length as you've had today. But what I think is also critical to understand about these programs is that they're also, they allow our programs to work, but they're preparing our kids for the future in a way that is critical. They are what really makes or breaks it for a lot of these kids and lower income families. They can often be what gets these kids excited about their careers and exposed to careers. And so as your role, as you're considering both the current workforce of the parents and the future of these kids, I'm hoping that you consider continuing to work with these programs in your future initiatives. We find that the space of these after school and summer programs is such a space of innovation in addition to a space of prevention. But in the areas of, for example, AI, we've been able to work with some of the folks in this room on getting this content to kids in these programs in a way that they can learn it at a very appropriate, safe way without the risks of cheating. And so it's a very innovative space. And as you're coming up with your priorities for next year, I really hope that you consider adding on some of these programs to your conversations. And again, what's just really important to remember is that childcare does not stop at age 5 in Montana, and our families across the state need these resources that our programs are providing them. And so we've got to look for solutions that don't limit some programs or leave some programs out of the conversation. So thank you again for all your time today and your hard work on these topics and everything you all do.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we will adjourn. There was a question. I do think that question, Jill, I think asked the same question, which was perfect. And more for the board members, I'm trying to stay consistent is all I was doing. Perfect. You asked the question, it got answered, that works great. It didn't matter in this particular case, it may later. And so just wanted to stay consistent on that. Thank you to Aaron Kellum and the team at Falco for the tour we're about to take. Would really encourage you. It does say optional. I'd like to change it to highly recommended. It does take time and energy to do this type of thing, and we really do appreciate you doing that. So address 6600 Highway 10 West in Missoula. We'll adjourn here and go there. Following that, it is certainly optional. It's only a reception at our store. So, but feel free. We did bring in some hors d'oeuvres and drinks and whatnot, and they are prepared to give you a tour if you'd like to of our facility as well. So that is at 8571 Running West Road in Missoula. So we are hereby adjourned.